The first gunshot came at dawn. Rowan Cade was halfway through skinning a deer when the crack echoed across the canyon, sharp and clean. He didn't flinch. 10 years in the high country had taught him to distinguish between a hunter's kill shot and something meant for him. This was the former, some fool probably trying to bring down an elk 3 ridges over. He wiped the blade on his pants and kept working. The cabin behind him squatted against the mountainside like a scar. Weathered pine logs chinked with moss and mud, a roof that leaked when the snow got heavy, smoke threading from a chimney made of stacked river stones. It wasn't much, but it was his, and more importantly, it was far from everything else. The deer's hide peeled back in sections. Rowan worked methodically, the way he did everything now. No wasted motion, no hesitation. The mountains demanded efficiency, and 10 years was long enough to learn that lesson or die trying. He'd done both, in a way. The blood on his hands was warm, almost pleasant in the cold morning air. October had turned the aspens gold, and the first serious snow was maybe a week out. He needed this meat to last through November, which meant smoking most of it, salting the rest. The hide would make a decent coat liner if he worked it properly. His horse, a rangy gelding named Smoke, stamped near the creek. The animal had its ears forward, alert but not spooked. Another shot. Closer this time. Rowan paused, knife in hand, and listened. Silence. Then the distant complaint of a crow, pissed off at being disturbed. He went back to work. The thing about living alone was that you learned to trust your instincts in a way civilized people never did. In town, folks ignored the small warnings. The tension in a room, the way someone's smile didn't match their eyes, the shift in the air before violence broke loose. Out here, ignoring those warnings got you killed. And Rowan had no intention of dying today. He finished with the deer as the sun cleared the eastern peaks, washing the valley in pale gold light. The meat went into the smokehouse, a lean-to structure he'd built his second winter. The hide got stretched and scraped, then rubbed with a mixture of brain matter and ash. Waste nothing. The mountains taught that too. By mid-morning, he'd burned through his coffee. That was a problem. Rowan stood in the cabin doorway, tin cup in hand, and considered his options. He had flour enough for another 2 weeks, salt for a month if he rationed. But coffee was different. Coffee was the one thing that made the frozen mornings bearable, the one luxury he allowed himself. Which meant a trip to Iron Hollow. He hated Iron Hollow. The town sat in the valley like a rotten tooth, crooked buildings, crooked people, the kind of place where everyone knew your business and most of them wanted to see you fail. Rowan hadn't been down in almost 4 months, and he'd been perfectly happy with that arrangement. But coffee. He saddled Smoke with the same reluctance he'd feel preparing for surgery. The horse sensed his mood and pinned its ears, but Rowan just tightened the girth and swung up. The trail down was narrow and steep, switchbacking through pine forest so thick the sun barely penetrated. 3 hours later, Iron Hollow came into view. The town hadn't improved. Main Street was a strip of mud and horse shit, flanked by buildings that leaned into each other like drunks. The mercantile, the saloon, the bank, each one a monument to barely concealed greed. Rowan had been born 20 miles from here, and he'd spent the first 23 years of his life thinking this valley was the entire world. Then the land war happened, and he learned exactly how small the world could get. He tied Smoke outside Brennan's mercantile and went in, keeping his hat low. The store smelled like sawdust and pickle brine. Old man Brennan was behind the counter, his face folding into surprise when he saw Rowan. "Cade, thought you were dead." "Not yet." "Shame," Rowan almost smiled. Brennan had never pretended to like him, which was more honest than most. "Need coffee, 2 pounds, and salt if you've got it." Brennan moved slowly, his hands knotted with arthritis. He pulled down a burlap sack and began weighing beans. "Town's busy today. You picked a hell of a time to show up." "Why's that?" "Auction." The word landed wrong. Rowan felt something cold settle in his gut. "What kind of auction?" "The kind you don't want to know about." Brennan didn't look up from the scale. "Frank Mercer's settling debts. Got himself a prize this time." Frank Mercer. The name alone made Rowan's jaw tighten. The banker was a particular breed of snake, well-dressed, well-spoken, and absolutely poisonous. He'd made his fortune buying up failed farms during the land war, consolidating power while good people lost everything. Rowan had his own reasons to hate the man. What's he auctioning? The question came out harder than intended. Brennan finally looked up. His eyes were sharp despite the age. A woman, Eliza Hart. Her father died owing Mercer near $3,000. Now the debt's hers, and Mercer's calling it in the old way. Marriage auction. Rowan had heard of them, relics from rougher times when debts could be paid in flesh instead of currency. They were supposed to be illegal now, but out here, the law was whatever men with money said it was. When? His voice was flat. Noon, town square. Brennan measured out the salt with deliberate slowness. You're not thinking of getting involved? It wasn't a question. Rowan didn't answer. He paid for the supplies, gathered them into his saddlebags, and walked out into the street. He should have left, should have climbed back on Smoke and disappeared into the mountains where he belonged. But his feet carried him toward the square, drawn by something he couldn't name and didn't want to examine too closely. The crowd was already forming. 24 people, maybe more, clustered around a wooden platform that had been dragged into the center of the square. Most were men, ranchers, miners, drifters looking for cheap labor and cheaper companionship. A few women stood at the edges, their faces carefully blank. Frank Mercer stood on the platform like a man who owned the sky. He was 50, maybe 55, with silver hair and a suit that probably cost more than most of these people made in a year. His smile was practiced, his voice smooth as he addressed the crowd. Gentlemen, ladies, thank you for gathering on this fine autumn day. He spoke like he was selling livestock, which Rowan supposed he was. As you know, the late Thomas Hart left behind considerable debts which his daughter has inherited along with his property. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Mercer continued, in accordance with territorial law and the settlement agreement, Miss Hart's hand in marriage will be offered to satisfy said debts. The winning bidder assumes all financial obligations and gains full legal rights as husband and head of household. That was when Rowan saw her. She stood at the edge of the platform, flanked by two of Mercer's men. Mid-20s, dark hair pulled back tight, face pale but composed. She wore a simple gray dress that had seen better days, and her hands were clasped in front of her like she was praying, but her eyes were pure defiance. She wasn't broken. Not yet. Mercer gestured, and one of his men pushed her forward. She stumbled slightly but caught herself, lifting her chin as she faced the crowd. Miss Eliza Hart, Mercer announced, age 24, literate, capable with household duties, and in possession of a sturdy constitution. He smiled. Bidding starts at $500. The silence that followed was obscene. Then a voice from the back. 600. Rowan turned. A rancher he didn't recognize, burly and red-faced. Mercer nodded. 600. Do I hear 7? 700. A miner this time, missing most of his teeth. The bids came faster. 800, 9, 1,000. Eliza stood motionless through it all, her face a mask, but Rowan saw her hands tighten, knuckles going white. 1,500, 18, 2,000. The crowd was enjoying this. Some of them were laughing. Mercer's smile widened. $2,000, a bargain, gentlemen, considering the 3,000. The voice cut through the noise like a blade. Mercer's head snapped around, searching for the source. The crowd parted slightly, and Rowan realized with a sick jolt that the voice had been his own. Every eye in the square turned toward him. He stood at the back of the crowd, one hand on his belt, feeling the weight of their stares. This was insane. This was the stupidest thing he'd done since. Mercer's expression shifted from surprise to something darker. Mr. Cade, I didn't realize you were interested in such domestic arrangements. I'm interested in coffee, Rowan said flatly. But 3,000 buys the debt, right? That's what you said. Indeed, Mercer's voice had gone cold. Though I must say, this is unexpected. You've been quite the hermit these past years. Yeah, well, I get lonely. A ripple of laughter from the crowd, but it was uneasy now. Everyone knew who Rowan Cade was. Everyone knew what he'd done. Mercer's jaw tightened. 3,000 is a substantial sum. Are you certain you can cover it? Rowan reached into his coat and pulled out a leather pouch. It hit the platform with a heavy thunk. Gold dust and coins. Everything he'd saved over 10 years of trapping and hunting. His entire stake. The price of his isolation. "Count it," he said. For the first time, Mercer looked uncertain. He glanced at Eliza, then back at Rowan. "This is highly irregular." "You said highest bidder. I'm bidding." Silence. Mercer's face went through several expressions before settling on cold fury, but he was trapped by his own rules and he knew it. He gestured sharply to one of his men, who picked up the pouch and began counting. The square was dead quiet. Rowan didn't look at Eliza. He couldn't. If he looked at her, he might realize what he'd just done, and then he'd have to think about why, and that was a path he absolutely could not walk right now. The man finished counting. He nodded to Mercer. $3,240, Mercer said through gritted teeth. "More than enough." Rowan's voice was steady. "So we done here?" Mercer stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly he smiled. It was the kind of smile that promised future consequences. "Indeed we are, Mr. Cade." He turned to Eliza, his voice dropping to something only she could hear. Rowan saw her flinch, saw Mercer's hand brush her arm in a gesture that made Rowan's hand drift toward his belt. Then Mercer stepped back, and one of his men pushed Eliza toward the edge of the platform. She descended the steps carefully, her face still composed. When she reached the ground, she looked at Rowan for the first time. Her eyes were green, sharp green, like new pine needles. "You're insane," she said quietly. "Yeah, probably." Behind them, Mercer's voice rang out. "Sold to Rowan Cade for $3,000. May they find happiness together." The words dripped with mockery. The crowd began to disperse, some disappointed, others relieved. Rowan felt their stares like heat on his back. He gestured toward Smoke. "You ride?" "Not well." "You're about to learn." She didn't argue. He helped her up into the saddle. She was lighter than he expected, then swung up behind her. The contact felt strange, foreign. He hadn't been this close to another person in years. Eliza sat rigid, her spine straight as an iron rod. "Hold on," he said. "To what?" "The saddle horn. Unless you want to fall off." She gripped it with both hands. Rowan turned Smoke toward the mountain trail and kicked the horse into motion. They were halfway out of town when she finally spoke. "Why?" He'd been expecting the question. He still didn't have an answer. "Seemed like the thing to do." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I've got." Smoke's hooves clattered on the rocky trail. The town fell away behind them, and Rowan felt something loosen in his chest. The same relief he always felt when leaving civilization. Except this time, he hadn't left alone. Eliza was silent for several minutes. Then, "Where are we going?" "My place." "Which is where?" "Up." She turned slightly, enough that he caught her profile. "You're not much for conversation." "No." "Good. Neither am I." Despite everything, Rowan almost smiled. The trail climbed steeply, switchbacking through dense pine. Smoke was tired. The trip down and back in one day was pushing it, but the horse kept moving. The afternoon sun slanted through the trees, turning everything gold and green. They didn't talk. Rowan was acutely aware of her in front of him, the way she held herself, the scent of her hair, lavender, somehow, even after everything. The occasional tremor that ran through her when Smoke stumbled. He'd bought a woman. Actually bought her, like she was livestock or property. The reality of it settled over him like cold water. What the hell had he been thinking? He didn't know this person. Didn't know anything about her except that she'd looked at that crowd with defiance instead of defeat. And something in that look had reached through 10 years of carefully constructed walls and grabbed him by the throat. Stupid, reckless, insane. All true. They rode in silence until the cabin came into view, squatting against the mountain like it had always been there. Rowan reined in and dismounted, then helped Eliza down. She stood there, taking it all in, the rough logs, the crooked chimney, the smokehouse and lean-to. Her expression was unreadable. "It's not much," Rowan said. "No, it's not." He led Smoke to the lean-to and unsaddled the horse, going through the familiar motions while Eliza waited. When he finished, he gestured toward the cabin. "You coming?" She followed him inside. The interior was exactly what you'd expect. A single room with a stone fireplace, a rough table, a narrow bed against the far wall. Pelts hung from the rafters. His rifle leaned in the corner. Everything smelled like wood smoke and cured meat. Eliza moved to the center of the room and turned in a slow circle. One bed. Yeah. I'm not sleeping with you. Didn't ask you to. She looked at him directly then, and he saw the fear underneath the defiance. Small, controlled, but there. Rowan held up both hands. I sleep outside most nights anyway. Summer or winter. You can have the bed. Some of the tension left her shoulders. Why did you do this? Already told you. No. Her voice was sharp. Don't give me that seemed like the thing to do garbage. Men don't throw away $3,000 on a whim, so why? Rowan turned away, moving to the fireplace. He began stacking kindling, buying time. You didn't deserve what was happening to you. Lots of people don't deserve what happens to them. That doesn't make strangers buy them. I'm not most people. Clearly. He got the fire started, then stood. Look, I don't have a good answer. I saw you up there, and I saw them treating you like meat, and I couldn't walk away. That's all. Eliza studied him for a long moment. You're the one who killed David Voss. It wasn't a question. Yeah. During the land war. Yeah. Everyone says you murdered him in cold blood. Rowan's jaw tightened. Everyone says a lot of things. But you did kill him. Yes. She absorbed this. Were you justified? Depends who you ask. I'm asking you. The fire crackled between them. Rowan thought about that night, the way it had gone bad so fast, the blood in the snow, the screaming, the way everything had collapsed afterward. Voss and his men came to my family's ranch, he said quietly. During the height of the war, they wanted the land. My father wouldn't sell, so they persuaded him. With fists and boots and burning hay bales. My mother tried to stop them. He paused. The words felt like rocks in his throat. I came back from checking fence lines and found my father dead. My mother... He stopped, started again. Voss was still there, still laughing about it. Eliza's face had gone very still. So yeah, Rowan continued, I killed him. Shot him 3 times. Would have been 4, but I ran out of bullets. He met her eyes. You want to leave? I won't stop you. But you should know what you're dealing with. She didn't move. Where would I go? Back to town. I'll escort you down in the morning if... To what? To Frank Mercer? Her laugh was bitter. He'd own me twice over then, and everyone would know I couldn't even make it one night as your wife. We're not... He caught himself. We're not really married. According to the law, we are. You paid my debt. That makes it binding. She crossed her arms. Unless you plan to annul it? Do you? I asked first. They stared at each other. The fire popped. No, Rowan said finally. I don't plan to annul it. Then we have an agreement. Eliza moved to the window, looking out at the darkening mountains. I'll pull my weight. I can cook, clean, mend. I'm not afraid of work. I didn't buy you to be a servant. Then what did you buy me for? The question hung in the air. I don't know, Rowan admitted. I really don't. For the first time, something almost like a smile touched her mouth. Well, at least you're honest about it. Night fell fast in the mountains. Rowan made dinner, venison stew, the same thing he'd been eating for a week, while Eliza examined the cabin with the careful attention of someone cataloging escape routes. They ate in silence. You really sleep outside? She asked eventually. Usually, unless it's below 0. Why? He shrugged. Habit. Spent a lot of years on the run after Voss. Got used to it. On the run from who? Voss's family. Bounty hunters. People who figured killing me would settle scores. He spooned up stew. They mostly gave up after a few years. Turns out I'm hard to kill. Lucky for me. Maybe. After dinner, Rowan showed her where things were. The water barrel, the root cellar, the privy out back. He gave her a spare blanket and a shirt that would work as a nightdress. Door bars from the inside, he said. If you want to use it. She looked at him steadily. Will I need to? No. Then I won't. He nodded and headed for the door. Rowan? He turned. Thank you, Eliza said. I don't know why you did it, but thank you. He didn't know what to say to that, so he just left. Outside, the night air was cold and clean. Rowan spread his bedroll near the smokehouse, far enough from the cabin to give her space. The stars were coming out, hard, bright points in the blackness. He lay back and stared up at them. What had he done? 10 years. 10 years of solitude, of peace earned through isolation. And he'd thrown it away in one impulsive moment for a woman he didn't know. Because she'd looked at that crowd with her chin up. Because something in her eyes had called to something in him. Because he was tired of being alone, even if he'd never admitted it until now. Smoke shifted in the lean-to. An owl called from the ridge. The night settled around him like a familiar coat. Inside the cabin, a lamp flickered out. Rowan closed his eyes and tried not to think about the way Eliza had said his name, or the fact that for the first time in a decade, his cabin held someone besides himself. Tomorrow would bring its own problems. Tonight, he just let himself breathe. The mountains were quiet. For now. Satyret. Morning came with complications. Rowan woke to the smell of coffee. He sat up, disoriented. He'd been dreaming about the land war, fire and screaming, but the scent of coffee dragged him back to the present. Gray dawn light was filtering through the trees. The cabin door was open. He was on his feet instantly, hand moving to his knife. But then he saw her, Eliza, standing in the doorway with a tin cup in her hands, watching him with an expression he couldn't read. You snore, she said. No, I don't. Like a wounded bear. Rowan scrubbed a hand across his face. You made coffee. Found the beans you bought yesterday. Figured you'd want some. She took a sip. It's terrible, by the way. I don't know what you did wrong, but this tastes like tree bark. I like tree bark. Apparently. She handed him the cup and went back inside. Rowan followed, still trying to wake up. The cabin had been cleaned wasn't the right word. Organized. The pelts were stacked more neatly. The table was scrubbed. His rifle had been moved. Don't touch my rifle, he said. I was dusting. Don't dust my rifle. Eliza raised an eyebrow. Do you always wake up this charming? Usually I wake up alone. Well, things change. They stared at each other. Then, despite himself, Rowan felt his mouth twitch towards something that might have been a smile. Fair enough. He drank the coffee. It was terrible. He drank it anyway. Over the next hour, they fell into an awkward rhythm. Rowan showed her around the property, the creek for water, the root cellar, the trail down to the valley. Eliza absorbed everything with the same careful attention she'd shown last night. How often do you go to town? She asked. Couple times a year, less if I can manage it. Supplies. I hunt, trap, trade pelts when I need cash. He paused. Used to have more saved up, but you spent it on me. Yeah. She was quiet for a moment. I'll find a way to pay you back. With what? I don't know yet, but I will. Rowan didn't argue. There was something in her voice that said the subject was closed. They were walking back to the cabin when Smoke whinnied, sharp and alarmed. Rowan's hand went to his belt. Get inside. What? Inside. Now. Eliza must have heard something in his voice because she moved, quick and quiet. Rowan positioned himself between the cabin and the trail, every sense alert. Hoofbeats, multiple horses. They emerged from the tree line a minute later, 3 riders, armed and deliberate. Rowan recognized the lead man immediately. Cole Brennan, the mercantile owner's son and one of Mercer's enforcers. Cade, Cole called out, reining in 20 feet away. Didn't expect to see you playing house. Didn't expect to see you playing errand boy. What do you want? Cole's smile was ugly. Mr. Mercer sent us. Seems there was an irregularity with yesterday's transaction. No irregularity. I paid the debt. See, that's the thing. Cole leaned forward in his saddle. Mr. Mercer's lawyers looked into it. Turns out a marriage auction requires certain formalities, documentation, witnesses beyond just the crowd. Rowan's blood went cold. The hell it does. Territorial law, very specific. Cole's smile widened. which means the sale wasn't legal. Miss Hart remains indebted to Mr. Mercer, and your money, well, that's a separate issue. That's horseshit, and you know it. Maybe, but Mr. Mercer's willing to be reasonable. You return the girl, we'll call it even. Keep your money, keep your mountain. Everyone goes home happy. And if I don't? The two men behind Cole shifted their hands toward their guns. Then things get complicated, Cole said. Rowan measured the distance, the angles. 3 armed men. Decent shots, probably. He could maybe take 1 before they returned fire. Maybe 2 if he was lucky. But he wouldn't survive all 3. The cabin door opened. No, Rowan said without looking back. Eliza, stay. I heard him. Her voice was steady. She walked past Rowan, stopping halfway between him and the riders. You want me to come back? Cole's smile turned predatory. That's the idea. And then what? Frank marries me himself? Sells me to someone else? Not my concern. Eliza nodded slowly. Then she reached down, grabbed a fist-sized rock from the ground, and hurled it at Cole's head. It caught him in the temple with a satisfying crack. Cole yelled and yanked his horse sideways. The animal reared, panicked. The other 2 riders were shouting, going for their weapons. Rowan moved. He covered the distance in 3 strides, grabbed the nearest rider's leg, and yanked. The man went down hard. Rowan's fist connected with his jaw before he could recover. Gunshot. The sound cracked across the clearing. Rowan rolled, came up with the fallen man's pistol, and fired twice. Not to kill, but to scatter. The horses bolted. Cole was swearing, blood running down his face, trying to control his mount. The 3rd rider had drawn his gun, but couldn't get a clear shot with the horses thrashing around. Next one's through your chest, Rowan called out. His voice was dead calm. Cole managed to settle his horse. He stared at Rowan with pure hatred, one hand pressed to his bleeding temple. You just made the biggest mistake of your life, Cade. Won't be the first time. Mr. Mercer won't. Mr. Mercer can come up here himself if he's got something to say. Rowan's gun didn't waver. But you 3 need to leave. Now. For a moment, it could have gone either way. Then Cole jerked his reins and turned his horse. This isn't over. It never is. The 3 riders disappeared back down the trail, leaving only dust and the smell of gunpowder. Rowan lowered the pistol. His hands were shaking, adrenaline, not fear. Behind him, Eliza let out a long breath. That was stupid, Rowan said. Which part? The rock. It worked, didn't it? He turned to look at her. She was pale but composed, her jaw set in that same stubborn line he'd seen yesterday. You could have been shot. So could you. She crossed her arms. Besides, you were about to do something equally stupid. I just moved things along. I had it under control. No, you didn't. You were calculating odds. I saw your face. She moved closer. They wanted me to go with them. I wasn't going to do that. Why not? The question seemed to surprise her. Because I made a choice yesterday. When you bid on me, I could have said no, could have refused, but I didn't. You didn't have much choice. I had more choice with you than I would have had with anyone else. Her eyes met his. That's worth fighting for. Rowan didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and turned to check on Smoke. The horse was agitated, but unharmed. Rowan spent several minutes calming him, going through the familiar motions while his mind raced. Mercer would come back. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. And next time he wouldn't send 3 men. He'd send enough to make sure the job got done, which meant Rowan had a decision to make. Run, like he'd run before. Take Eliza deeper into the mountains, find a new place, start over, or stand and fight. He was still weighing the options when Eliza spoke from behind him. I know what you're thinking. Yeah? You're thinking about running. Rowan's hand stilled on Smoke's neck. Maybe. Don't. You got a better idea? Yes. She moved to stand beside him, her hand resting on the horse's shoulder. We prove the marriage was legal. Find witnesses, documentation, whatever it takes. We make it so Frank can't touch me without breaking actual laws. Laws don't mean much out here. They mean something if you know how to use them. Her voice was firm. My father was a lawyer before the debts destroyed him. I know how these things work. If we can show the auction was legitimate, Frank loses his claim. And if we can't? Then we fight. But at least we'll have tried the smart way first. Rowan looked at her, really looked. The morning light caught the green of her eyes, made them almost luminous. There was steel in this woman. He'd seen it yesterday, but now he was starting to understand its depth. "You're not what I expected," he said. "What did you expect?" "Someone who needed saving." Her smile was sharp. "I do need saving, just not the way you thought." She stepped back. "So, do we run or do we fight?" Rowan thought about 10 years of running, 10 years of looking over his shoulder, of living like a ghost. He was tired of running. "We fight," he said. "Good." They spent the rest of the morning preparing. Rowan showed Eliza how to load and fire his spare pistol. She was a terrible shot, but at least she could hit the side of a barn. They secured the cabin, checked sight lines, discussed strategies. It felt strange, working with someone, but also good, like a muscle he'd forgotten he had, slowly remembering its purpose. At noon, they stopped for food. "Tell me about your father," Rowan said. Eliza's face closed slightly. "What do you want to know?" "How he ended up owing Mercer $3,000. She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee. "He was a good lawyer, honest. That was the problem." She set down the cup. "When the land war started, Frank Mercer saw an opportunity. He bought up failing ranches, consolidated power. My father tried to stop him legally, filed injunctions, represented families who were being forced out. Let me guess, Mercer didn't appreciate that. No. He destroyed my father piece by piece, discredited him, bribed judges, made sure no one would hire him. Then he offered a loan, said it was charity, a way to keep the office running." Her jaw tightened. "It was a trap. The interest was impossible. Within 2 years, my father owed everything." "And when he died?" "Last month, heart gave out." She looked up. "Frank showed up at the funeral. Told me I had 30 days to pay, or he'd take payment another way. That's when I knew." She stopped. "Knew what?" "That he'd wanted this all along. The debt was just the mechanism. He'd been planning to own me from the start." Rowan felt something dark and cold settle in his chest. "He's not getting you." "I know." They finished eating in silence. That afternoon, Rowan taught Eliza the mountain. How to read the weather in the clouds, how to find water, which plants were safe and which would kill you. She absorbed it all with fierce concentration, asking questions, pushing for details. By evening, he was exhausted. "You always this intense?" he asked. "You always this grumpy?" "Yeah." "Then we're matched." They ate dinner as the sun set, painting the peaks in shades of amber and rose. The beauty was almost painful. "I can see why you stayed," Eliza said quietly. "Where?" "Here. Up here." She gestured at the mountains. "It's peaceful. Most days. Even with people trying to kill you. Especially then." She laughed, an actual laugh, surprised and genuine. It transformed her face, made her look younger. Rowan found himself staring. "What?" she asked. "Nothing, just, you should laugh more." "Give me something to laugh about." "Fair point." They cleaned up as darkness fell. Rowan was preparing his bedroll when Eliza spoke from the cabin doorway. "You don't have to sleep outside." He paused. "It's fine. I prefer... The bed's big enough for 2 if we keep to our sides, and it's getting cold." She crossed her arms. "I'm not suggesting anything, just... It's practical." But Rowan considered. The temperature was dropping fast, first frost probably tonight. "All right," he said. They settled in on opposite sides of the narrow bed, a careful foot of space between them. It was awkward and strange, and Rowan was certain he wouldn't sleep. But somehow, with the sound of her breathing beside him and the mountain quiet pressing in, he drifted off. He dreamed of fire again. But this time, when he ran toward the flames, he wasn't alone. 3 days passed. They fell into a routine: water, wood, food, training. Eliza learned to shoot with grim determination, improving incrementally. Rowan taught her to track, to move quietly, to read the forest. At night, they talked. Small things at first. Her childhood in Iron Hollow, his years trapping. The winter he nearly died from pneumonia, the time she'd accidentally set her father's office on fire trying to make tea. Slowly, the walls came down. On the fourth day, smoke alerted them to riders again. But this time, it was only one man. Rowan recognized him immediately. Sheriff Hayes, 60 years old and tired, riding a gray mare up the mountain trail. "Rowan Cade," Hayes called out when he saw them. "You're a hard man to find." "That's the idea. What do you want?" Hayes dismounted slowly, his joints creaking. "Need to talk to you, both of you." They brought him inside. Rowan made coffee while Hayes settled into the chair by the fire, groaning with relief. "Too old for this?" the sheriff muttered. Then louder. "Frank Mercer filed a complaint. Says you stole his property." "He means me," Eliza said. "I know what he means." Hayes looked at her. "He's claiming the auction wasn't legal. Says Rowan here kidnapped you." "That's a lie," she said immediately. "I know. I was there." Hayes accepted the coffee Rowan handed him. "But Frank's got lawyers. They're making noise about pressing charges, getting territorial authorities involved." "Let them try," Rowan said. "That's the thing." Hayes set down the cup. "They already are. There's a marshal coming, due in Iron Hollow next week." The words landed like stones. A territorial marshal? Eliza's face had gone pale. "Clayton Reeves, hard man. Doesn't care about local politics, just the law." Hayes looked between them. If he decides the auction was invalid, he'll arrest Rowan for kidnapping. Maybe worse. "Then we prove it was valid," Eliza said. "How?" "Frank's already paid off half the witnesses. The ones who'd speak for you are too scared." Rowan's mind was racing. A territorial marshal changed everything. This wasn't just Mercer being vindictive anymore. This was official. "There has to be something," Eliza insisted. "Documentation, records." "Frank controls the records," Hayes said gently. "I'm sorry, but unless you can find evidence he can't suppress, you're looking at serious trouble." Silence fell over the cabin. Then Rowan spoke. "What if we had proof Mercer's corrupt? Would that change things?" Hayes frowned. "What kind of proof?" "The kind that shows he's been breaking laws for years. Fraud, extortion, maybe worse." "You have that?" "No, but I know someone who might." Eliza turned to him. "Who?" Rowan looked at her steadily. "Your father's old files. Everything he gathered trying to fight Mercer legally. Where did they end up?" Understanding dawned in her eyes. "The office. Frank seized it after Dad died, but..." She paused. "But Dad kept backup copies. Hidden. Where?" "I don't know. He never told me." Her voice was frustrated. "He said it was safer if I didn't know, in case Frank ever came after me directly." "Then we need to figure it out." Hayes stood. "This is dangerous. If Frank finds out you're digging into his affairs..." "He's already trying to destroy us," Rowan cut in. "Might as well make it worth his while." The sheriff studied them both. Then he sighed. "You're either very brave or very stupid." "Probably both," Eliza said. Despite everything, Hayes smiled. "Your father would be proud." He moved to the door. "I'll do what I can to slow down the marshal, but you don't have much time." "How long?" "Week, maybe less." After Hayes left, Rowan and Eliza stood in the cabin, the weight of their situation settling around them. "We're going back to town," Eliza said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah. Frank will see us coming." "Probably." "We could die." "Yeah." She looked at him. "You're not very good at reassurance." "Never claimed to be." But when she smiled, small and determined, he felt something shift in his chest, something that had been frozen for a decade beginning to thaw. "All right," Eliza said, "then let's go to war." Outside, the mountains held their breath, and in the valley below, Frank Mercer was about to learn that some people don't stay buried. They left before dawn, when the mountain was still dark and the stars were beginning to fade. Rowan saddled Smoke while Eliza gathered what little they'd need: food, water, the spare pistol she still couldn't shoot straight. The cold bit through their coats, promising winter wasn't far off. "You sure about this?" Rowan asked as he tightened the cinch. Eliza didn't look up from checking the pistol's chambers. "No, but we're doing it anyway." They rode down the mountain in silence, the trail treacherous in the pre-dawn gloom. Rowan kept smoke to a careful walk, listening to the forest wake around them. An elk bugled somewhere to the north. A raven called out, harsh and mocking. By the time they reached the valley floor, the sun was breaking over the eastern peaks, turning the sky bloody. Iron Hollow looked the same as it always did, crooked and mean. But now Rowan saw it differently. Now he had something to lose. They left Smoke at the livery with old Tom Barnes, who took one look at them and shook his head. "You two got a death wish?" "Probably," Rowan said, handing over coins for the horse's keep. "Frank's got men watching the streets. Word is he's expecting trouble." "He's about to get it." Barnes pocketed the money. "Your funeral." They walked toward the center of town, keeping to the shadows where they could. The morning was still early enough that most folks were indoors, but Rowan spotted two of Mercer's men loitering near the bank. They clocked him immediately. "So much for the element of surprise," Eliza muttered. "Never had it to begin with." Thomas Hart's old law office sat on a side street, wedged between a boarding house and a barber shop. The windows were dark, the door locked. A notice had been pasted to the glass, "Property of First Territorial Bank." Eliza stared at it, her jaw tight. "You all right?" Rowan asked. "No." She tried the door handle, locked as expected. "But I will be." Rowan glanced up and down the street. Still clear. He pulled out his knife and worked it into the lock, a skill he'd picked up during his years on the run. The mechanism clicked after a moment, and the door swung open. Inside, the office was exactly as Mercer had left it, furniture covered in dust, papers scattered across the floor, everything stripped of value. It smelled like old tobacco and defeat. Eliza moved through the space slowly, her fingers trailing along the desk where her father had worked. Rowan watched her face, saw the grief there, carefully controlled. "Where would he hide documents?" he asked, keeping his voice gentle. "I don't know. He was paranoid near the end, kept saying Mercer had eyes everywhere." She turned in a slow circle, studying the room. "It would have to be somewhere obvious enough that I'd eventually find it, but hidden enough that Frank's men would miss it." They searched methodically. Rowan checked the floorboards while Eliza went through the desk drawers, pulling out old contracts and correspondence. Nothing. An hour passed. Then 2. "This is useless," Eliza said, frustration cracking through her voice. "It could be anywhere. He could have destroyed it before he died, or Frank could have already found it, or—" "Stop." Rowan straightened from where he'd been examining the baseboards. "Your father was a lawyer, right? Trained in thinking through problems?" "Yes." "So he wouldn't hide evidence somewhere random. He'd hide it somewhere that meant something, somewhere you'd understand." Eliza went still. "Somewhere that meant something to both of us." "Yeah." She closed her eyes, thinking. Rowan waited, giving her space. Then her eyes snapped open. "The courthouse." "What?" "When I was little, Dad used to take me to the courthouse on Saturdays when he had to file papers. I'd sit in the records room and read while he worked." She was already moving toward the door. He said it was the one place in town where truth still mattered. They left the office and headed for the courthouse, a squat stone building at the north end of Main Street. Rowan kept watch while Eliza led them around back to a side entrance she remembered from childhood. The door was unlocked. Inside, the building was quiet and dim. Their footsteps echoed on the tile floors as they made their way to the records room. It was exactly as Eliza remembered, floor-to-ceiling shelves packed with bound volumes and file boxes, the smell of old paper and dust. "Where do we start?" Rowan asked. "Property records. That's what Dad was fighting over. Land sales, deeds, transfers." She began pulling down boxes, checking dates. If he hid proof of Frank's fraud, it would be mixed in with legitimate filings, hiding in plain sight. They worked quickly, scanning documents, looking for anything out of place. Rowan found himself impressed by how efficiently Eliza moved. She knew the system, understood how legal records were organized. She'd been trained for this. "Here," she said suddenly. "Look at this." Rowan moved to her side. She was holding a property deed dated 3 years back. "This is the Morrison Ranch. Frank claimed they defaulted on a loan and he foreclosed legally." Her finger traced down the document. "But look at the signature. That's not Jim Morrison's handwriting." "You sure?" "I watched him sign papers a dozen times when Dad represented him." This is a forgery. She pulled out another file. And this one, the Chen property. Same thing. Forged signature, backdated transfer. They kept digging. Within an hour, they'd found evidence of at least 8 fraudulent property transfers. Frank Mercer had been systematically stealing land, forging documents, and filing them as legitimate transactions. "This is enough," Rowan said. "We take this to the marshal." "No." Eliza was staring at another document, her face gone pale. "What is it?" She handed it to him without speaking. It was a loan agreement dated 5 years ago. Thomas Hart had borrowed $3,000 from First Territorial Bank. But stapled to the back was a second document, a letter in Frank Mercer's handwriting. Rowan read it aloud. "Thomas, as discussed, this loan is contingent upon your agreement to cease all legal action against my business interests. Should you violate this agreement, the full amount becomes due immediately, with interest compounding daily. Additionally, upon your death, all debts transfer to your heir, to be satisfied by whatever means I deem appropriate. Signed, Franklin Mercer." The words hung in the air. "He killed him," Eliza said quietly. "My father. The stress, the impossible debt. Frank engineered all of it. He wanted Dad dead and me vulnerable." Rowan felt rage building in his chest, cold and sharp. This is conspiracy, extortion. A marshal would have to... Footsteps in the hallway. They both froze. Voices now, getting closer. Said they were seen heading toward the courthouse. Check every room. Mercer's men. Rowan grabbed Eliza's arm. "Is there another way out?" "Backstairs, this way." They gathered the documents and moved fast, heading for the rear of the building. Behind them, the voices grew louder. Someone tried the records room door. They hit the back stairs at a run, taking them 2 at a time. Eliza stumbled once, but caught herself, clutching the papers to her chest. They burst out into an alley just as someone shouted from inside the building. "Move," Rowan said. They ran. The alley opened onto a side street. Rowan pulled Eliza left, away from the main square, navigating by instinct. Behind them, more shouts. The sound of boots on cobblestones. They ducked into a narrow passage between buildings, pressing themselves against the wall as 3 men ran past, too focused on the main street to check the shadows. Eliza was breathing hard. "Where now?" Good question. Going back to the livery meant walking straight into Mercer's men. The sheriff's office might be safe, but Hayes had made it clear he could only do so much. They needed somewhere to regroup, somewhere unexpected. "The church," Eliza said suddenly. "What?" "There's a church on the east side. Father Domingo, he was friends with my dad. He'll hide us." It wasn't a great plan, but it was better than nothing. They moved carefully through the back streets, avoiding the main thoroughfares. The church was a small adobe structure, simple and weathered. They slipped in through the side door. Inside, it was cool and quiet. Rows of wooden pews, a simple altar, candles flickering in the dimness. An old man in priest's robes looked up from where he was arranging flowers. His face creased into surprise when he saw Eliza. "Child, I heard you were..." He stopped, noticing Rowan. "What's happened?" "Father Domingo, we need help." Eliza moved forward, still clutching the documents. "Frank Mercer, he's after us. We have evidence of what he's done, but his men are searching the town." The priest's expression darkened. "Frank Mercer is a dangerous man." "I know, but we can stop him. We just need time." Domingo looked between them, weighing something in his mind. Then he nodded. "Come, there's a room in back." He led them through a door behind the altar into a small vestry. "You can stay here. I'll tell anyone who asks that I've seen nothing." "Thank you," Eliza said. "Your father was a good man. I won't let his daughter be taken by wolves." He paused. "But you should know, there's a territorial marshal arriving this afternoon, earlier than expected." Rowan's stomach dropped. "How early?" "He rode in an hour ago. Frank's already met with him." They were out of time. After Domingo left, Rowan and Eliza spread the documents out on a small table, inventorying what they had. 8 forged property deeds. The letter proving Frank's extortion. Copies of loan agreements with impossible terms. It was damning. But was it enough? "We need to get this to the marshal," Eliza said. Mercer's probably already spinning his version of events. Then we tell the truth. You think a marshal's going to believe us over a respected banker? Eliza's jaw set in that stubborn line he was learning to recognize. He will if we show him proof. And if he doesn't, if Mercer's already bought him off, then we fight. She met his eyes. But I'm not running anymore, Rowan. I'm tired of letting Frank Mercer win. There was steel in her voice, the same steel he'd seen when she threw that rock at Cole Brennan's head. All right, Rowan said. We do this your way, but we do it smart. They spent the next hour planning. Eliza would approach the marshal directly, requesting an official audience. Rowan would stay in the background, ready to intervene if things went wrong. They'd present the evidence calmly, methodically, giving the marshal no reason to dismiss them as hysterics. It was a thin plan, but it was all they had. As afternoon shadows began to lengthen, Father Domingo returned. The marshal's at the hotel, room 12. Frank's men are watching the entrances, but he hesitated. There's a back way, through the kitchen. Show us, Rowan said. They moved through the town carefully, using alleys and back paths. The hotel was a 3-story structure, the nicest building in Iron Hollow. Domingo led them to the rear entrance, where the kitchen staff received deliveries. The stairs are just inside, 2nd floor, end of the hall. The priest gripped Eliza's hand. Be careful, child. I will. They slipped inside. The kitchen was busy with dinner preparations, staff too focused on their work to notice 2 more people moving through. They found the back stairs and climbed quickly. The 2nd floor hallway was empty. Room 12 was at the far end, exactly as Domingo said. Rowan stopped Eliza before she could knock. You sure about this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. He almost smiled. You say that a lot. It's been that kind of week. She knocked, 3 sharp raps. A voice from inside. Come in. They entered. The marshal was younger than Rowan expected, mid-30s, lean and weathered, with eyes that missed nothing. He sat at a small desk, going through papers. When he looked up, his hand moved slightly toward his hip. Marshal Reeves, Eliza said. My name is Eliza Hart. I need to speak with you about Frank Mercer. Reeves studied them both. I've already spoken with Mr. Mercer. He mentioned you might show up. Then you know he's trying to claim I was kidnapped. He says, Mister, Cade here took you from a legal proceeding, that the marriage auction was invalidated due to lack of proper documentation. That's a lie, Eliza said flatly. The auction was legal. Rowan paid my debt in full. Frank's just angry he lost control of me. Lost control? Reeves's eyebrow rose. Interesting choice of words. Eliza stepped forward, setting the documents on his desk. Frank Mercer murdered my father, not directly. He did it through debt and stress and impossible conditions. But he killed him as surely as if he'd pulled a trigger, and he did it to get to me. That's a serious accusation. I have proof. She walked him through it, the forged deeds, the extortion letter, the pattern of fraud going back years. Reeves listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When she finished, silence filled the room. This is... Reeves picked up the letter, reading it again. If this is authentic, it's evidence of multiple felonies. It's authentic, Eliza said. My father kept copies of everything. He knew Frank was dirty. He just couldn't prove it before Mercer destroyed him. Reeves set down the paper. I've heard rumors about Frank Mercer. Nothing concrete, just whispers. But this, he gestured at the documents. This is concrete. Rowan felt something loosen in his chest. So you'll investigate. I'll do more than investigate. Reeves stood. I'll arrest him. When? Now. The marshal reached for his coat. But I'll need you both to come with me, as witnesses. Frank has men all over town, Rowan said. They won't let you take him without a fight. Then it's a good thing I brought deputies. Reeves opened the door, revealing 2 armed men waiting in the hallway. Gentlemen, we're making an arrest. Mr. Cade, Miss Hart, stay close. They moved through the hotel as a group, drawing stares from other guests. Outside, the street was busy with afternoon traffic. Rowan spotted at least 4 of Mercer's men, all of them tensing as they recognized the marshal. The bank was directly across the street. Reeves walked with the calm confidence of a man who'd done this 100 times. His deputies flanked him, hands resting on their weapons. Rowan and Eliza followed, every nerve on edge. They were halfway across the street when Cole Brennan stepped out of the bank, blocking their path. "Marshal, didn't expect to see you escorting criminals." "Step aside, Mr. Brennan." "I'm afraid I can't do that. Mr. Mercer gave specific instructions. I don't care what instructions he gave. I'm here to arrest him on charges of fraud, forgery, and extortion." Reeves's voice was hard. "Now move, or I'll add obstruction to your charges too." Cole's hand drifted toward his gun. The street went very quiet. Rowan tensed, calculating distances and angles. If shooting started, Eliza was too exposed. He shifted slightly, positioning himself between her and Cole. She noticed. "Don't," she whispered. "I'm not letting—" "Marshal Reeves," a new voice interrupted, smooth, cultured. "This is quite the scene you're causing." Frank Mercer stood in the bank doorway, looking every inch the respectable businessman. His suit was immaculate, his smile pleasant. Only his eyes betrayed him, cold and calculating. "Mr. Mercer," Reeves said, "you're under arrest." "On what charges?" "Fraud, forgery, extortion, conspiracy." Reeves pulled out a folded paper, an arrest warrant. "I have evidence of at least 8 illegal property transfers, as well as written proof of your extortion of Thomas Hart." Mercer's smile didn't waver, but something shifted in his eyes. "I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. Perhaps we could discuss this inside, like civilized men." "No discussion, you're coming with me." "I see." Mercer's gaze moved to Eliza. "So the girl has been busy. Tell me, Miss Hart, did you enjoy rifling through your father's things? Did it make you feel close to him?" "Don't talk to her," Rowan said. "Ah, Mr. Cade, the hermit with delusions of heroism." Mercer's smile turned sharp. "Tell me, how does it feel to throw away 10 years of hiding for a woman you barely know? Was she worth your life savings? Will she be worth what comes next?" "Enough," Reeves cut in. "Cole, step aside. Frank, put your hands out." For a moment, it hung in balance. Then Mercer nodded slightly, barely perceptible. Cole drew his gun. Everything happened at once. Reeves's deputies moved, drawing their weapons. Cole fired, not at Reeves, but at Rowan. The bullet went wide, punching through a window behind them. Rowan shoved Eliza down and drew his pistol in one motion, returning fire. The street erupted into chaos, people screaming, running for cover, more of Mercer's men appearing from doorways and alleys. Reeves shot Cole in the shoulder, spinning him around. One of the deputies went down, clutching his leg. Rowan fired twice more, forcing 2 men back behind a water trough. "Get inside!" he yelled at Eliza. "Not without you!" He pulled her behind a wagon just as bullets tore through the wood. Splinters exploded around them. This was bad. They were pinned down, outnumbered. Rowan had 6 shots left. Maybe 5. He'd lost count. Across the street, he could see Mercer retreating into the bank, still smiling. "We need to move," he told Eliza. "Where?" "Anywhere but here." He grabbed her hand and ran, keeping low. Bullets kicked up dirt at their heels. They made it to the corner of a building, pressed themselves against the wall. Behind them, Reeves was shouting orders, his voice cutting through the gunfire. "Cease fire! Territorial authority! Cease fire!" Slowly, the shooting stopped. Rowan risked a glance. Cole was on the ground, disarmed. 2 other men had their hands up. The rest had scattered, but Mercer was gone. "He's running," Eliza said. "Let the marshal—" "No." She pulled away from him, her face fierce. "He doesn't get to run. Not this time." Before Rowan could stop her, she was moving, not away from the bank, but toward it. He swore and followed, catching up to her at the entrance. Inside, the bank was empty except for one terrified teller cowering behind the counter. "Where did he go?" Eliza demanded. The teller pointed toward the back. "Office, but he's armed." They moved quickly through the building. Mercer's office was at the rear, door closed. Rowan tried the handle, locked. He stepped back and kicked it. The door splintered but held. Second kick, and it crashed open. Mercer stood behind his desk, a pistol in his hand pointed at them. "I should have killed you both when I had the chance," he said. Rowan raised his own gun. "You'll have to settle for losing everything instead." "You think those documents prove anything?" I have judges, lawyers, connections you can't imagine. This will disappear like morning fog. Maybe, Eliza said, but everyone saw what happened out there. Everyone heard the marshal read the charges. You're finished, Frank. Mercer's face twisted. Your father said the same thing, right before his heart gave out. Did you know that? He came to me one last time begging for mercy, and I watched him die knowing he'd failed. Eliza's hand was shaking, but her voice was steady. You're a monster. I'm a businessman. There's no difference in this territory. He adjusted his aim, pointing the gun directly at her. But you're right about one thing. I am finished, which means I have nothing left to lose. His finger tightened on the trigger. Rowan fired. The shot caught Mercer in the shoulder, spinning him. His gun discharged into the ceiling, plaster raining down. He stumbled, clutching the wound, face contorted in pain and rage. Marshal Reeves appeared in the doorway, gun drawn. Drop it, Frank. For a moment, Mercer looked like he might try anyway. Then the pistol fell from his fingers, clattering to the floor. It's over, Reeves said quietly. Mercer sagged against the desk, blood seeping between his fingers. His eyes found Eliza. Your father was weak, just like you. No, she said. He was good, and you killed him for it. Reeves moved forward, producing shackles. He locked them around Mercer's wrists with efficient brutality. Franklin Mercer, you're under arrest for fraud, extortion, conspiracy, and attempted murder. You'll be transported to territorial court for trial. You'll regret this, Mercer hissed. All of you. I doubt it. They dragged him out, past the gathered crowd, past the wreckage of his attempted escape. People stared in silence as the most powerful man in Iron Hollow was led away in chains. Eliza watched it all with an expression Rowan couldn't quite read. You all right? He asked quietly. I don't know yet. Sheriff Hayes appeared beside them, looking tired. Hell of a day. Yeah. The deputy who got shot, he'll live. Cole Brennan's being held for attempted murder of a federal officer. The others scattered, but we'll round them up. He paused. Frank's finished. Between what you found and what happened today, he'll be lucky to avoid a noose. Good, Eliza said simply. Hayes nodded and moved away to help with the cleanup. Rowan and Eliza stood in the street as the sun began to set, watching Iron Hollow pick up the pieces. We should go, Rowan said eventually. Back to the mountain? Yeah, unless you want to stay. No. She turned to him, and for the first time since the shooting, she smiled. It was small and exhausted, but real. I want to go home. The word hit him harder than it should have. Home. Not his cabin. Home. They collected smoke from the livery and rode out as twilight painted the valley purple. Neither of them spoke much. There was too much to process, too much that had changed. By the time they reached the cabin, full dark had fallen. Rowan unsaddled the horse while Eliza got a fire started. When he came inside, she was sitting on the floor in front of the hearth, staring into the flames. He sat beside her. Thank you, she said after a while. For what? For not letting me do something stupid back there. In the bank. When Frank had the gun. You were going to do something stupid? I was thinking about it. Yeah, I figured. He stretched out his legs. For what it's worth, you did good today. Your father would have been proud. Her eyes were bright in the firelight. You think so? I know so. You took down one of the most corrupt men in the territory using his own system against him. That takes guts and brains. And a mountain man who's willing to shoot people for me. That too. She laughed, surprising them both. Then she leaned against his shoulder just slightly, a gesture that asked permission. Rowan held very still, afraid to break the moment. I was terrified today, she said quietly, when the shooting started. When you pushed me down and I thought you might get shot, I realized I don't want you to die. That's good? No, you idiot. I mean, I really don't want you to die. Which is complicated because people around me have a habit of dying. I'm hard to kill, remember? Still. She was quiet for a moment. 10 days ago, I didn't know you existed. Now I can't imagine going back to the mountain without you. Rowan's chest felt tight. That's the exhaustion talking. Maybe. Or maybe it's the truth. She pulled back enough to look at him. I know this wasn't what you signed up for. You bid on me to save me from Frank, and instead you got bullets and bounty hunters and Eliza. What? Stop talking. He kissed her. It was clumsy and uncertain, and she made a small surprised sound against his mouth. But then she was kissing him back, her hands coming up to his face, and everything else fell away. When they finally broke apart, she was smiling. Well, she said, that was unexpected. Yeah. Good unexpected or bad unexpected? Still deciding. She laughed and kissed him again, softer this time. When they separated, she rested her forehead against his. I'm still not sleeping with you, she said. Didn't ask you to. Just wanted to be clear. Crystal. But that night, when they lay down on opposite sides of the bed, the space between them was smaller, and when Rowan woke in the early hours, Eliza had drifted closer in her sleep, one hand resting near his arm. He didn't move away. Outside, the mountain held its peace, and for the first time in 10 years, Rowan Cade allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, he'd found something worth more than solitude. The war wasn't over. Mercer still had connections, still had power. There would be testimony, trials, consequences neither of them could predict. But tonight, in the quiet dark, with Eliza breathing softly beside him and the weight of the day settling into his bones, Rowan let himself simply exist in the moment. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. That was enough. The peace lasted exactly 4 days. Rowan was splitting wood when he heard the horses, multiple riders, moving fast up the trail. He dropped the axe and grabbed his rifle from where it leaned against the cabin wall. Eliza, he called. She appeared in the doorway, wiping flour from her hands. She'd been trying to make bread, with mixed results. How many? 3, maybe 4. Frank's men? Don't know yet. But when the riders broke through the tree line, Rowan recognized Sheriff Hayes in the lead, flanked by 2 of Reeves's deputies. The tension in his shoulders eased slightly. Hayes dismounted with his usual stiffness, favoring his left knee. His face was grim. We got a problem, he said without preamble. Rowan lowered the rifle. What kind of problem? The kind where Frank Mercer posted bail yesterday and disappeared 6 hours later. The words hit like a fist to the gut. How the hell did he make bail? Reeves had him on federal charges. Territorial judge ruled that the shooting made him a victim too, set bail at $10,000. Hayes spat into the dirt. Frank had it paid within an hour. Reeves tried to block it, but the judge has connections, probably ones Frank bought years ago. Eliza had gone very still in the doorway. Where is he now? That's the thing. Nobody knows. He walked out of the jail, got on a horse, and vanished. Could be halfway to California by now, or he's coming here, Rowan finished. Yeah. One of the deputies spoke up, a young man named Miller. Marshal Reeves sent us to warn you. He's got men searching, but the territory's big, and Frank knows it well. How long ago did he leave? Eliza asked. Hayes checked his pocket watch. 8 hours, give or take. Rowan did the math. 8 hours on horseback. If Mercer was coming to the mountain, he could already be close. But approaching in daylight would be suicide. Too exposed, too easy to spot. He'd wait for dark. You two should come back with us, Miller said. Stay in town where we can protect you. No, Rowan and Eliza said simultaneously. Hayes sighed. Figured you'd say that. But the offer stands. Frank's not thinking straight anymore. He's got nothing to lose, which makes him dangerous as hell. We can handle dangerous, Rowan said. Can you handle a dozen armed men? Because that's what he'll bring. Every loyal gun he's got left, all of them ready to die for a payday. The deputy was right, and Rowan knew it, but going back to town meant putting themselves at Mercer's mercy, relying on other people for protection. It meant giving up the high ground, literally and figuratively. We stay, he said. Hayes studied him for a long moment, then he nodded. All right, but you're going to need help. I work alone. Not anymore, you don't. Hayes gestured to the deputies. Miller and Graves here are staying. Marshal's orders. You're material witnesses in a federal case, which means protecting you is official business. Rowan wanted to argue, but Eliza spoke first. Thank you, Sheriff. Hayes tipped his hat to her. Your father was a good man, Miss Hart. I owe him this much. He turned back to Rowan. Reeves is coming up tomorrow with more men. You just need to hold until then. Tomorrow's a long time. Yeah, it is. Hayes climbed back onto his horse with a grunt. Don't die, Cade. I hate paperwork. After he left, Rowan stood in the clearing with 2 federal deputies and a woman he'd known for less than 2 weeks, preparing to defend against a man who had nothing left to lose. Miller was maybe 25, eager and nervous. Graves was older, quieter, with the look of someone who'd seen his share of trouble. They both carried rifles and knew how to use them, which was something. How do you want to do this? Graves asked. Rowan looked around the clearing, seeing it with new eyes. The cabin sat against the mountainside, protected from behind but exposed on 3 sides. The creek ran along the northern edge, providing water but also a natural approach. The tree line was dense, offering cover for anyone trying to sneak close. We need to see them coming, he said. Eliza, show me where you've been practicing with the rifle. She led them to a spot on the eastern slope, about 50 yards from the cabin. From here you could see the main trail and part of the clearing. Good sight line, Graves observed. We put someone here, they can cover the approach. And leave the other sides exposed, Miller added. They spent the next 2 hours setting up defenses. Rowan showed them the terrain, the weak points, the places where someone could get close without being seen. They built rough barriers from logs and rocks, creating positions with overlapping fields of fire. It was basic, improvised, and probably wouldn't hold against a determined assault, but it was better than nothing. As they worked, Eliza pulled Rowan aside. You need to tell me the truth, she said quietly. Can we actually hold them off? He considered lying, considered telling her that everything would be fine, that the deputies and their rifles would be enough, but she deserved better than that. I don't know, he admitted. If it's just a few men, yeah. But if Frank brings everyone he's got left and they're willing to take casualties, he shook his head. It could go either way. Then we need an advantage. Like what? Her eyes were sharp, calculating. Like proof that Frank's men are committing crimes under federal jurisdiction. If we can document an assault, get evidence, it becomes more than just us defending ourselves. It becomes attempted murder of federal witnesses. How does that help us right now? It doesn't, but it helps us survive what comes after. She grabbed his arm. Think about it. If we kill Frank's men defending ourselves, we're just killers in the eyes of anyone Frank's bought off. But if we have proof they attacked us while we were under federal protection, it's different. It's a crime that can't be ignored. Rowan stared at her. You want to document our own shootout? I want to make sure that if we survive this, Frank can't twist it into something else. She was right. Damn it, she was right. Miller, Rowan called out, you got anything to write with? The deputy produced a small notebook and pencil. I'm supposed to keep records of official actions. Why? Because you're about to witness a crime, Eliza said, and I want every detail written down. They prepared through the afternoon. Miller took up position on the eastern slope with his rifle. Graves stayed near the cabin, covering the western approach. Rowan positioned himself near the creek, where he could move quickly to support either position. Eliza refused to hide inside. I can shoot well enough now, she argued, and you need every gun you can get. You'll get killed. So will you. At least this way we're together. Rowan wanted to lock her in the cabin, tie her to the bed if necessary, but the stubborn set of her jaw told him it would be a waste of time. You stay behind cover, he said finally. You shoot only if you have a clear target, and if things go bad, I know, run for the trees. No, if things go bad, you surrender. She opened her mouth to argue. I'm serious, Eliza. Frank wants you alive. If it comes down to it, you give yourself up and wait for Reeves to sort it out. And leave you to die? Better than both of us dying. They stood there, locked in silent battle. Then Eliza leaned up and kissed him, hard and fierce and desperate. You're an idiot if you think I'd do that, she said against his mouth. Yeah, probably. Sunset came and went. The mountain settled into darkness, the temperature dropping fast. Rowan made coffee and brought it to Miller first, then Graves. Neither man spoke much, both focused on watching the shadows. Eliza sat near the cabin door, rifle across her lap, her face pale in the lamplight. They might not come, she said. They'll come. How do you know? Because Frank's not the kind of man who leaves things unfinished. An hour passed, then 2, Rowan was beginning to think maybe he'd been wrong. Maybe Mercer had run after all, when smoke whinnied from the lean-to, sharp and alarmed. Everyone tensed. Then, from the darkness beyond the tree line, a voice called out. "Rowan Cade, I know you're listening." Frank Mercer. Rowan stood slowly, rifle in hand. "I'm here, Frank." "Good. I'd like to make you an offer." "Not interested." "You haven't heard it yet." Mercer's voice was conversational, almost friendly. "I'm willing to let you live, you and those two deputies. All you have to do is give me the girl." "Go to hell." "Come now, be reasonable. You barely know her. Why die for someone you met 2 weeks ago?" Rowan didn't answer. He was trying to pinpoint Mercer's location by sound alone. The voice seemed to come from the northeast, maybe 60 yards out. "She's the one I want," Mercer continued. "Her testimony put me in chains. Her father's documents ruined me. I just want to have a conversation with her, to settle our accounts." "You want to kill her?" Eliza called out. A pause. Then, "Ah, Miss Hart, I was hoping you'd speak up." The friendliness left Mercer's voice. "Your father screamed when he died. Did you know that? Clutched his chest and begged for mercy." "You're lying." "Am I? Ask yourself, what kind of man takes a loan he knows he can't repay? What kind of father leaves his daughter to settle his debts?" Mercer's laugh was cold. "He was weak, Eliza. Just like you. The only difference is, I'm going to make sure you don't have the luxury of a quick death." Rowan saw Eliza's finger tighten on the trigger. "Don't," he said quietly. "That's what he wants. To make you angry, make you careless." She took a shaky breath and nodded. "Last chance, Cade," Mercer called. "Give her to me and walk away." "Come and take her." Silence. Then gunfire erupted from 3 directions at once. Bullets tore through the clearing, slamming into the cabin walls, kicking up dirt. Miller returned fire from his position, the muzzle flash bright in the darkness. Graves was shooting too, targeting movement in the trees. Rowan pulled Eliza down behind the water trough as rounds punched through the wood above their heads. He counted muzzle flashes, at least 8 shooters, maybe more. "Stay down!" he yelled over the noise. He raised up and fired twice at a shadow moving near the creek. The figure dropped. Whether from his shot or just taking cover, he couldn't tell. The shooting continued in bursts. Mercer's men were probing the defenses, testing the positions. They weren't rushing in. They were smart enough to know that would get them killed. Miller shouted something Rowan couldn't make out. Then his rifle went silent. "Miller!" Graves called. "Miller, report!" No answer. Rowan swore. Either the deputy was dead or pinned down. "I'm going to check on him," he told Eliza. "That's suicide." He was already moving, staying low, using the shadows. Bullets tracked him too close, one tearing through his coat sleeve. He made it to the eastern slope and found Miller slumped against a rock, clutching his side. "Got hit," the deputy gasped. "Can't see straight." Rowan checked the wound. Gut shot, bleeding bad. Miller needed a doctor, and soon, or he wouldn't make it through the night. "Can you shoot?" "Maybe, if they get close enough." "Then stay here and keep pressure on that wound." He left Miller with his rifle and scrambled back toward the cabin. The shooting had died down, Mercer's men regrouping, probably. When he reached the water trough, Eliza grabbed his arm. "Miller?" "Alive. Hurt bad." Graves appeared from the western side, breathing hard. "I counted 9 of them, maybe 10. They're moving to surround us." "How long until dawn?" The deputy checked his watch by feel. 4 hours. Maybe 5. They wouldn't last that long, not with Miller out of the fight and their ammunition running low. Rowan made a decision. "I'm going out there." Both Eliza and Graves stared at him. "That's insane," Graves said. "They're expecting us to sit here and defend. They're not expecting an attack." "Because it's suicide." "Maybe. But if I can take out enough of them, create enough chaos, you two can get to the horses and run." "No," Eliza said flatly. "It's the only—" "I said no." Her voice was steel. "We're not splitting up. We're not running. And you're not dying for me." "Eliza, listen to me." She grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. "My whole life, men have made decisions for me. My father, Frank, everyone. You're the first person who treated me like I had a choice. So give me a choice now. Don't just throw yourself at them and expect me to run. Rowan's chest felt tight. What do you want to do? I want to fight. Together. And I want to survive this together. Her eyes were fierce. Tell me there's another way. He thought fast, turning over options. They couldn't defend indefinitely. They couldn't run. They couldn't surrender. But they could change the battlefield. The smokehouse, he said suddenly. Graves frowned. What about it? It's full of dry wood and cured meat. Goes up, it'll burn hot and fast. Create smoke, confusion. Force them to either pull back or come in blind. And then what? Then we use the confusion to break through their line. Head down the mountain to meet Reeves coming up. It was a terrible plan, but it was better than sitting here waiting to die. I'll do it, Eliza said. No, the smokehouse is on the west side. Graves is covering west. You need to stay here to cover the main approach. I'm the only one who can reach it without leaving a position exposed. She was right, damn her. Fine, but you take this. Rowan pulled out his pistol and handed it to her. You get spotted. You shoot first and run like hell. She took the gun. Her hand was shaking, but her voice was steady. I know. They synchronized their watches. Eliza would move when the next volley started, using the noise as cover. She'd set the fire, get clear, and signal when it was burning. The minutes crawled past. Rowan kept watch on the tree line, trying to spot movement. Mercer's men were being careful now, learning from their mistakes. Then a rifle cracked. Graves, firing at something in the woods. The rest of Mercer's men opened up in response, bullets hammering the cabin. Eliza moved. Rowan watched her dash across the clearing, low and fast. She made it to the smokehouse and disappeared behind it. His heart was in his throat. The shooting continued. He returned fire, keeping up the pressure. Beside him, Graves was burning through ammunition. Then he saw it, a flicker of orange light from the smokehouse. The flicker became a flame, became a blaze. Smoke billowed up, thick and black, catching the wind. Eliza appeared at the edge of the clearing, waving. Go, Rowan told Graves. Get Miller. We move in 1 minute. The deputy nodded and scrambled toward the eastern slope. Rowan grabbed the few supplies he could carry. Water, ammunition, a blanket. The cabin was lost. The life he'd built here, the decade of solitude, all of it was burning along with the smokehouse. He felt nothing about that. Eliza reached him, breathing hard. It's going. Good. Now A figure burst from the tree line, one of Mercer's men, face twisted with rage. He raised his rifle. Rowan shot him before he could fire. The man went down, but behind him came more. 3 of them, rushing the cabin while the smoke provided cover. Rowan fired twice more. Eliza shot with the pistol, her hands shaking but her aim true enough. 1 man dropped, the other 2 scattered. Move, Rowan yelled. They ran toward the eastern slope where Graves was helping Miller to his feet. The deputy was pale, barely conscious, but he could walk with support. The smoke was everywhere now, choking and blinding. Perfect cover, if they used it right. They pushed into the trees, heading down slope. Behind them, the fire was roaring, consuming everything. Rowan could hear Mercer's men shouting, confused and angry. Then a voice cut through the chaos. Frank Mercer, screaming orders. Find them! They're heading down! Move! They stumbled through the darkness, Miller groaning with each step. The terrain was treacherous, rocks and roots waiting to trip them. Rowan led, following the trail by memory and instinct. A gunshot behind them. Then another. Someone had picked up their trail. Faster, Rowan urged. They pushed harder, Miller crying out in pain but keeping his feet moving. Graves was half carrying the younger deputy now, his face set in grim determination. Eliza stayed close to Rowan, the pistol still in her hand. The trail widened, became easier. They were maybe a mile from the cabin now, descending fast. If they could just reach the valley floor, they might... A figure stepped onto the trail ahead of them. Cole Brennan, rifle raised, smiling despite the bandage still wrapped around his head. End of the line, Cade. Rowan's rifle was empty. He'd burned through his ammunition in the firefight. He still had his knife, but that wouldn't help against a gun. Cole's smile widened. Frank wants the girl alive. The rest of you, he doesn't care. I'm thinking I'll start with the deputies then. Eliza shot him. The pistol cracked twice. The first bullet caught Cole in the chest. The second hit his throat. He staggered backward, the rifle falling from his hands. His mouth worked, trying to form words, but only blood came out. Then he fell. Eliza lowered the gun, her face white. "Move," Rowan said, pulling her forward. They ran past Cole's body, down through the trees. More shouts behind them, closer now. Mercer's men were gaining ground. The trail opened onto a clearing, and there, like a miracle, were lights. Torches. Marshal Reeves stood in the center of a group of armed men, his face hard. "Federal officers," he bellowed into the darkness behind Rowan. "Throw down your weapons." Rowan and the others stumbled into the clearing. Miller collapsed, Graves going down with him. Eliza was shaking so hard she could barely stand. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit stopped. Reeves strode forward. "Where's Mercer?" "Up there," Rowan managed, with maybe half a dozen men left. "Not anymore." The marshal gestured, and his deputies moved past them, heading up the trail with rifles ready. Within minutes, the sounds of surrender echoed down, men throwing down weapons, being placed in custody. But Frank Mercer wasn't among them. They searched for an hour, combing the mountain. They found 6 of his men, all subdued and shackled. They found the burning remains of Rowan's cabin, the fire finally dying down to embers. They didn't find Mercer. "He's gone," Reeves said finally. "Probably ran when he realized we were coming." Rowan stood at the edge of the clearing, staring up at what remained of his home. Everything he'd built, everything he'd saved, gone. Eliza appeared beside him. She didn't say anything, just took his hand. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "It's just a cabin." It was more than that. Yeah, it was. But he couldn't bring himself to care, not with Eliza standing beside him, alive and unhurt despite everything. They walked back to where the deputies were organizing the prisoners. Miller had been stabilized. He'd live, though he'd need surgery soon. Graves looked exhausted but determined. Reeves approached them. "We'll get you both back to Iron Hollow. You can give your statements there and—" "No," Rowan interrupted. "No? Frank's still out there. Until he's caught, we're not safe. And going back to town just makes us targets." "So what do you suggest?" Rowan looked at Eliza. She nodded. "We disappear," he said. "For a while. Until either you catch him or he gives up." Reeves considered this. "I can't officially endorse witnesses fleeing jurisdiction." "Then don't endorse it. Just look the other way for a few days." The marshal studied them both. Then he sighed. "I didn't hear that. And I certainly didn't see which direction you went." He held out a hand. "Good luck, Cade." They shook. As dawn broke over the mountains, Rowan and Eliza rode out on Smoke, heading east into territory Rowan knew like his own heartbeat. Behind them, Iron Hollow fell away. Ahead, the wilderness opened up, dangerous and beautiful and free. "Where are we going?" Eliza asked. "There's a place, 2 days' ride, cabin I used during my first year on the run. Nobody knows about it." "Will we be safe there?" "Safe enough." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I killed a man tonight." "Yeah." "I don't feel anything about it. Is that wrong?" Rowan thought about all the men he'd killed over the years, the ones who deserved it and the ones who probably didn't. The weight of it never really went away, but you learned to carry it. "You did what you had to do," he said. "Cole would have killed all of us without blinking. You saved our lives." "That doesn't make it easier." "No, it doesn't." They rode in silence as the sun climbed higher, painting the world gold and green. Somewhere behind them, Frank Mercer was running. Somewhere ahead, a future waited, uncertain and dangerous and theirs. But for now, in this moment, they were alive. They were together. That was enough. The old cabin sat in a box canyon so narrow you'd miss it if you didn't know where to look. Rowan had stumbled on it during his second winter running, half dead from cold and hunger, and it had saved his life back then. Now, 12 years later, it was still standing, barely. The roof had holes. The door hung crooked on leather hinges, but the stone fireplace was intact and the walls would keep out the worst of the wind. "Home sweet home," Eliza said, sliding off Smoke. "It's temporary." "I know." She looked around the canyon, taking in the high walls, the thin stream running through. "It's defensible, though. Only one way in or out." That was the idea. They spent the rest of the day making the place livable. Rowan patched the roof with pine boughs while Eliza swept out years of accumulated debris, animal droppings, dead leaves, the skeleton of something that might have been a fox. By nightfall, they had a fire going and coffee brewing. Eliza sat on the floor near the hearth, hugging her knees. She hadn't said much since they'd arrived, her mind clearly elsewhere. "You thinking about coal?" Rowan asked. Among other things, she poked at the fire with a stick. "Mostly I'm thinking about how everything I owned is either burned or seized by the bank, how my father's dead, how the man who killed him is still out there somewhere." She looked up. "How 2 weeks ago I had a house and a name and some idea of who I was. Now I have nothing. You have me." The words came out before he could stop them. Eliza blinked. Then, slowly, she smiled. "Yeah, I guess I do. For what that's worth. It's worth more than you think." She set down the stick and moved to sit beside him. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why haven't you asked about my father, about what really happened to him?" Rowan considered. "Figured you'd tell me when you were ready." "And if I'm never ready?" "Then you don't tell me." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "He didn't just die of a heart attack. I mean, he did, but..." She took a breath. "The night before he died, Frank came to the house. They argued. I heard them through the door. Frank told him the debt was being called in full, that he had 30 days to pay or forfeit everything." "Your father tried to negotiate?" "He begged." Her voice was flat. "I heard him begging, offering to sign over the house, the office, everything he owned, but Frank said it wasn't enough. He wanted collateral that would guarantee payment." "You. Me." She stared into the flames. "He proposed a contract, said if my father signed me over as security, he'd extend the deadline, give him time to earn the money back." Rowan felt cold rage building in his chest. "What did your father say?" "He told Frank to go to hell, threw him out of the house." Eliza's hands were shaking. "The next morning I found Dad on the floor. The doctor said his heart gave out. But I know the truth. The stress, the fear, the choice Frank forced him to make, it killed him. That's why you didn't run when Mercer came for you." "I thought about it. Thought about disappearing into the mountains, trying to make it on my own." She looked at him. "But Frank would have just put out a bounty. Hired men to hunt me down. At least at the auction, I had some control over who I ended up with." "And you ended up with me." "Lucky me." Despite everything, Rowan smiled. "You always this sarcastic when you're traumatized?" "It's a defense mechanism. My father taught me that too." She leaned against his shoulder. "Tell me something." "Like what?" "Tell me something true. Something you've never told anyone else." Rowan thought about deflecting, making a joke, but there was something in her voice that deserved honesty. "I miss my mother," he said quietly. "Every damn day, the way she smelled like bread and lavender, the way she'd hum while she worked, the sound of her laugh." He paused. "After Voss killed her, I spent years trying to forget, trying to bury it with anger and distance. But I can't. I don't want to." Eliza's hand found his. "What was her name?" "Sarah. Sarah Cade." She said it softly, like a prayer. "She'd be proud of you, I think, for what you did, for saving me." "I don't know about that. I'm a killer, Eliza, same as Voss, same as Mercer." "No." Her voice was firm. "You're nothing like them. You kill to protect. They killed for power. That's the difference." "You really believe that?" "I have to. Otherwise Cole's death means nothing." She pulled back enough to look at him. "I killed him to protect you, to protect all of us. If that makes me a killer too, then so be it, but I'm not going to carry shame for it." Rowan studied her face in the firelight, the determination there, the strength she'd forged from grief and fear. She was nothing like the woman he'd seen on that auction platform. That woman had been cornered, desperate. This woman was dangerous. "You're going to be all right," he said. "We're going to be all right," she corrected. "Stop trying to carry everything alone." That night, they slept side by side on the floor, wrapped in the single blanket they'd brought. Outside, the canyon walls held back the wind, and for the first time in days, Rowan felt something like peace. It lasted until morning. He woke to Smoke's alarm whinny, was on his feet with his rifle before his eyes were fully open. Eliza sat up, instantly alert. "Someone's here," he said quietly. "Frank?" "Don't know." They moved to the window, really just a gap in the logs where chinking had fallen out. Rowan scanned the canyon entrance. A single rider, coming slow and careful. Not trying to hide, but not charging in either. When the man got close enough, Rowan recognized him. Sheriff Hayes. Rowan lowered the rifle and stepped outside. Hayes saw him and raised one hand in greeting, the other clearly visible and empty. "Thought I might find you here," the sheriff called. "How?" "I'm old, not stupid. You mentioned this canyon once, years back. Figured it was worth checking." He dismounted stiffly. "Can I come in, or are you planning to shoot me?" "Depends on what you want." "To talk, nothing more." Rowan gestured toward the cabin. Inside, Eliza had the coffee going. Hayes accepted a cup gratefully and settled onto the floor with a groan. "You look like hell," Rowan observed. "Feel worse, but that's not why I'm here." Hayes took a sip, made a face. "Reeves caught 3 more of Frank's men yesterday. They're talking, trying to cut deals." "And?" "And Frank's not running. He's holed up about 15 miles south of Iron Hollow in an old mining camp. Got maybe 4 men left with him." Hayes set down the cup. "He's planning something." "Like what?" "That's the problem. Nobody knows. But one of the prisoners said Frank's been obsessed with you two. Keeps ranting about how he can't move forward until he settles accounts." Eliza spoke up. "He's going to keep coming." "Yeah." Hayes looked at her. "Which is why Reeves wants to end this. He's planning a raid on the mining camp tomorrow at dawn. Wants you both there." "Why?" Rowan asked. "We're witnesses, not lawmen." "Because Frank's going to lawyer his way out of this if we're not careful. We need your testimony, need you to face him in front of deputies and make your accusations official. Document everything." Hayes leaned forward. "Reeves thinks if Frank sees you both standing there, alive and unbroken, it'll push him over the edge, make him do something stupid." "Use us as bait," Eliza said. "More or less." Rowan shook his head. "But that's insane. We go down there, we're painting targets on ourselves." "You already have targets on you. This just puts you in a position to end it." Hayes stood with effort. "Look, I know it's not ideal, but Frank's not going to stop. He's lost everything: money, power, respect. You two are all he has left to focus on. Either you finish this now, or you spend the rest of your lives looking over your shoulder." The sheriff was right, and Rowan knew it. Running had bought them time, but not safety. Never safety. He looked at Eliza. "Your call." She didn't hesitate. "We go." They rode out with Hayes an hour later, heading south through terrain Rowan knew well. The sheriff filled them in on the details. Reeves would have 10 men positioned around the mining camp before dawn. The plan was to arrest Frank peacefully if possible, by force if necessary. "What if he won't surrender?" Rowan asked. "Then we make him." They made camp that night about 5 miles from the mining operation, hidden in a thick stand of pine. Reeves was already there with his deputies, checking weapons and going over the plan. The marshal looked up when they arrived. "Cade, Miss Hart, glad you could make it." "Didn't feel like we had much choice," Eliza said. "You don't. But I appreciate you coming anyway." Reeves gestured to a rough map sketched in the dirt. "Mining camps here, 3 buildings still standing, office, bunkhouse, equipment shed. Frank's using the office. We've had eyes on it since yesterday. 4 men confirmed, plus Frank himself." "What do you need from us?" Rowan asked. "You stay back until we have the situation secured. Once Frank's in custody, you approach and make your accusations formally. I'll have a deputy documenting everything." Reeves looked at them both. "And if things go wrong, you run. Understood?" "Understood," Eliza lied. They ate cold rations and tried to sleep, but Rowan's mind wouldn't settle. He kept thinking about the last time he'd seen Frank Mercer, bloodied and shackled, promising revenge. The man was cornered now, desperate. That made him more dangerous than ever. Beside him, Eliza was awake too. He could tell by her breathing. "You scared?" he asked quietly. "Terrified." "Me too." "Good. Means we're not stupid." She rolled to face him. When this is over, assuming we survive, what happens? What do you mean? I mean with us. Do we go back to your mountain, find a new one, go our separate ways? Rowan had been avoiding that question for days. I don't know. What do you want? I want... She paused, choosing words carefully. I want to wake up next to you. I want to build something that's ours, not borrowed or hiding or temporary. I want a life, Rowan, a real one. With me. Yes, you idiot, with you. His chest felt tight. I'm not good at that stuff. The normal life thing. I've been alone too long. Then we'll figure it out together, be bad at it together. She touched his face. I'm not asking for perfect. I'm asking for real. Rowan kissed her, slow and careful, trying to pour everything he couldn't say into the gesture. When they broke apart, Eliza was smiling. Was that a yes? She asked. Yeah, that was a yes. They held each other until the sky began to lighten, then rose with the rest of the camp. Reeves distributed final assignments, checked weapons one last time. Remember, he told everyone, we want Frank alive, but if he draws on you, put him down. They moved out in the pre-dawn darkness, spreading through the forest around the mining camp. Rowan and Eliza stayed back as ordered, positioned on a ridge with a clear view of the office building. Below, everything was quiet. Reeves gave the signal. His deputies moved in from three sides, rifles ready. The marshal himself approached the office door and knocked, loud and official. Frank Mercer, this is Marshal Clayton Reeves. You're surrounded. Come out with your hands visible. Silence. Then the office window shattered as gunfire erupted from inside. The deputies scattered, returning fire. Bullets chewed through the wooden walls of the building. One of Reeves's men went down, clutching his leg. Cease fire, Reeves bellowed. Mercer, you can't win this. Surrender now. Frank's voice came from inside, raw and furious. I'm not going back in chains. Then you'll die in that building. More shooting. The bunkhouse door opened and two of Frank's men ran out, firing wildly. The deputies cut them down before they made it 10 feet. Rowan watched it all with sick fascination. This was how it ended for men like Mercer. Not in courtrooms or through legal process, but in blood and gunpowder. The office door flew open. Frank Mercer stumbled out, pistol in one hand, the other clutching his side. Blood soaked through his shirt. His eyes were wild, scanning the area. They locked on the ridge where Rowan and Eliza stood. There! Frank screamed. There they are! He raised his pistol. 3 deputies fired simultaneously. Frank jerked, stumbled, but stayed on his feet. He was still trying to aim when a 4th shot caught him in the chest. He went down hard. Reeves rushed forward, kicking the pistol away. He checked Frank's pulse, then looked up at his men and shook his head. It was over. Rowan felt Eliza sag against him. Is he dead? Yeah. Good. Her voice was empty. That makes me a terrible person, doesn't it? No, it makes you human. They walked down to the camp. Reeves met them halfway, his face grim. He didn't leave us much choice. I know, Eliza said. She looked past him to where Frank's body lay in the dirt. Can I see him? You sure? I need to. Reeves stepped aside. Eliza walked forward slowly, Rowan staying close. She stood over Frank Mercer's corpse for a long moment, her face unreadable. My father was a better man than you, she said quietly, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it. She turned and walked away without looking back. They spent the next hour giving statements, documenting everything for Reeves's report. The marshal was thorough, asking questions, making notes. When he finished, he looked at them both. This closes the case. Frank's dead. His men are either dead or in custody. The property fraud is documented. Your testimonies are on record. He paused. You're free to go. The words took a moment to sink in. Free. What about the auction? Eliza asked. The marriage, is it legally binding? Far as I'm concerned, Cade paid your debt in full and you consented to the arrangement. That makes it legal enough. Reeves almost smiled. Though, if you want to make it official, I'd suggest finding a proper minister. They rode away from the mining camp as the sun climbed higher. Behind them, Reeves's men were loading bodies, securing evidence, doing the grim work that followed violence. Ahead, the territory opened up. vast and beautiful, and theirs. Where to? Eliza asked. Eliza Sautas. Rowan thought about his burned cabin, his lost solitude. Part of him mourned it, but a larger part, the part that had been lonely for 10 years without admitting it, felt nothing but relief. There's a valley about 30 miles north, he said. Good water, good timber. Far enough from Iron Hollow to have peace, close enough to get supplies when we need them. You want to rebuild? Yeah, if you're willing. I'm willing, she smiled. But this time we build it together. No more you handling everything alone. Deal. They were maybe an hour from the mining camp when Rowan saw the rider blocking the trail ahead. He reined in smoke, hand moving to his rifle. Then he recognized the horse, a big roan with white stockings. His stomach dropped. The rider sat motionless, silhouetted against the morning sun. As they got closer, Rowan could make out details. Young, maybe 25, lean and hard with his father's eyes. Caleb Voss. Rowan had known this day would come eventually. Had known it since the moment he killed David Voss 12 years ago. Sons didn't forget things like that. Who is that? Eliza asked quietly. Trouble. Caleb urged his horse forward until they were maybe 30 feet apart. His hand rested on his hip, near a pistol that looked well used. Rowan Cade, he said. His voice was steady, controlled. Been looking for you. Found me. Yeah. Caleb's eyes moved to Eliza. This her? The woman everyone's talking about? Leave her out of this. Can't do that. See, I've been following your story, heard about the auction, the shootout, all of it. Got me thinking about my father, about what you took from me. Rowan's hand was on his rifle, but he didn't draw. Your father killed my parents, Caleb. Murdered them in cold blood. What I did was justice. That's your version. Caleb's jaw tightened. My version is different. It says you shot an unarmed man. He wasn't unarmed, and he wasn't innocent. Maybe, but that doesn't change what you did. Doesn't change that I grew up without a father because of you. The air was heavy with tension. Rowan could feel Eliza beside him, could sense her fear. So what now? Rowan asked. You gonna try and kill me? Been planning to for years. Caleb's hand moved closer to his pistol. Tracked you all over this territory, lost you a few times, picked up the trail again, figured eventually you'd make a mistake, give me an opening. And now? Now I'm here. And you got a choice. You can draw, and we see who's faster, or you can get off that horse and take what's coming. Rowan measured the distance, the angles. Caleb was young and angry, which made him dangerous. But Rowan had experience, and he'd been in more gunfights than he could count. He could probably take him. Probably. Before he could respond, Eliza spoke. No. Both men looked at her. She slid off smoke and walked forward, placing herself between them. Eliza, get back! Rowan started. No. She looked at Caleb. You want revenge for your father. I understand that, but killing Rowan won't bring him back. It'll settle the score. Will it? Or will it just add another body to the pile? She took another step closer. I lost my father too, 2 months ago. A man named Frank Mercer destroyed him piece by piece until his heart gave out. Caleb's expression flickered. I heard about Mercer, heard he's dead. He is, and you know what? It doesn't help. My father's still gone. The hole he left is still there. Her voice cracked slightly. Killing the man who killed him didn't fix anything. It just ended the cycle. This is different. How? How is it different? Eliza's voice was fierce now. Your father killed Rowan's parents. Rowan killed your father. You kill Rowan, and what? Does that make it even? Or does it just mean more grief, more loss, more violence? Caleb was silent, his hand still near his gun. I know you're angry, Eliza continued. I know you want someone to pay. But look at him. She gestured to Rowan. Really look. He spent 12 years alone on a mountain, running from his past. He's already paid. Every day of isolation, every night of guilt. He's already paid. That's not enough. Then what is? How much blood will satisfy you? She stepped closer, close enough that Caleb would have to shoot through her to hit Rowan. Because here's what I know about revenge. It's empty. It burns hot and feels righteous, but when it's over, you're left with nothing, just more pain. Caleb's face was working, emotions warring across it. Your father made choices, bad ones, and Rowan's parents paid for those choices with their lives. Eliza's voice softened. I'm sorry you lost him. I'm sorry you grew up alone. But adding Rowan to the body count won't change that. Silence stretched between them. Rowan sat on his horse, barely breathing. He'd been prepared to fight, to die if necessary. But Eliza had stepped in front of him, had put herself in danger to offer Caleb something he'd never had. A choice. Slowly, Caleb's hand moved away from his pistol. You're wrong, he said quietly. It would help. For a while. Maybe, but only for a while. Eliza held out her hand. Or you could choose something else. Choose to let it end here. Caleb stared at her hand like it was a foreign object. Then, slowly he dismounted. He walked forward until he stood directly in front of Rowan. His eyes were wet, angry, grief-stricken. I hate you, he said. I know. I'll probably hate you for the rest of my life. Yeah, probably. But she's right. My father made his choices, and killing you won't bring him back. Caleb's voice broke. It won't bring him back. Rowan climbed down from smoke. He and Caleb stood face to face, separated by 12 years of grief and rage. I'm sorry, Rowan said. For what it's worth, I'm sorry you lost your father. I'm sorry I'm the one who took him from you. Caleb nodded once, sharply. Then he turned and walked back to his horse. Before he mounted, he looked at Eliza. You're either very brave or very stupid. Probably both, she said. Something that might have been a smile touched Caleb's face. Then he swung into the saddle and rode away without looking back. Rowan and Eliza stood in the trail, watching him disappear. That was the stupidest thing you've ever done, Rowan said finally. I know. He could have shot you. I know. You could have died. But I didn't. She turned to him. And now it's over, really over. The cycle's broken. Rowan pulled her close, his heart still hammering. Don't ever do that again. Can't promise that. Eliza, I can't promise I won't step in front of you. I can't promise I won't risk myself to save you. She looked up at him. Because that's what you do when you love someone. The words hung in the air. You love me, Rowan said. Yeah, I do. She smiled. Sorry if that's inconvenient. It's terrifying. Good. Love should be terrifying. Otherwise, what's the point? He kissed her then, hard and desperate and grateful. When they broke apart, the sun was fully up, washing the world in golden light. They climbed back onto Smoke and continued north, toward the valley Rowan had mentioned. Toward a future neither of them had planned, but both of them wanted. Behind them, the pass slowly released its grip. And ahead, something new was beginning. The valley was everything Rowan remembered, and nothing like it at all. He'd been here once before, years ago, passing through on his way to somewhere else. Back then it had just been land, water and timber and emptiness. Now, riding in with Eliza beside him, it looked like possibility. The creek ran clear and cold through the center, flanked by cottonwoods that were losing their leaves to autumn. The meadow grass was still green despite the season, fed by snowmelt from the peaks above. To the north, a stand of pine thick enough to provide lumber for years. To the south, gentle slopes that would catch the winter sun. This is it? Eliza asked. Yeah. She was quiet for a moment, studying the landscape. It's beautiful. It's remote. Good. I'm tired of people. Rowan almost smiled. 2 months ago, she'd been a town girl facing an auction block. Now she was choosing isolation with the same determination she'd brought to everything else. They made camp that first night near the creek, sleeping under the stars because they had no shelter yet. The temperature dropped hard after sunset, and Rowan woke twice to add wood to the fire. The second time, he found Eliza already awake, staring into the flames. Can't sleep? He asked. Too much quiet. It's strange after everything. He understood. The violence of the past weeks had left a kind of ringing silence in its wake. Your body kept expecting the next crisis, the next gunshot. It'll get easier, he said. Will it? Or do we just get used to it? Both, probably. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Tell me about the cabin you're going to build. What do you want to know? Everything. Where it'll sit, how big, what it'll look like. I want to see it before it exists. So Rowan told her. He described where he'd place it, on the eastern slope to catch morning sun, protected from the worst weather by the ridge behind. He talked about the size, the layout, the stone fireplace he'd build from river rocks, the loft for storage, the root cellar, the lean-to for smoke, and whatever other animals they might acquire. As he talked, Eliza's eyes brightened. She started adding her own ideas, a proper kitchen, windows that actually opened, a porch where they could sit in the evenings. "You're talking about a house," Rowan said. "What's the difference?" "A cabin's just shelter. A house is more." "Then let's build a house." She looked at him in the firelight. "Unless you're planning to leave me in a cabin while you sleep outside?" "No, I'm done sleeping outside." "Good, because I'm a terrible shot, and if a bear shows up, you're my only defense. You shot Cole Brennan." "That was different. He wasn't moving, and I was terrified." She paused. "Do you think about that? About the people we killed?" "Every day." "Does it get easier?" "No, but you learn to carry it." Eliza nodded slowly. "My father used to say that conscience was the price of being human, that the people who didn't feel guilt were the dangerous ones." He was right. "Yeah." She looked back at the fire. "I think he'd like you. If he'd met you before everything went bad, I think you two would have gotten along." "Maybe." "He was stubborn like you, believed in doing the right thing even when it cost him." Her voice caught slightly. "That's what got him killed in the end." Rowan moved closer, putting his arm around her. She leaned into him, and they sat that way until the fire burned down to embers and sleep finally claimed them both. The next morning, they started building. Rowan had done this before, constructed shelter from nothing, using only what the land provided. But it was different with Eliza helping. She couldn't fell trees or lift the heavy logs, but she could strip bark, measure distances, point out problems he'd missed. They worked through October and into November, racing the weather. The first snow came early, a light dusting that melted by noon but served as warning. Winter was coming, and they needed walls and a roof before it arrived in force. Some days were harder than others. Rowan's hands would bleed from the rough work, or they'd discover the logs they'd cut were too green and would warp. Eliza struggled with the physical demands, her town's soft hands developing calluses and blisters. They fought sometimes. Small arguments that flared hot and burned out quick, about where to place a window, how to divide the interior space, whether they needed a second door. But they always worked it out, usually by Eliza pointing out that Rowan was being stubborn and Rowan admitting she was right. "You're surprisingly reasonable for someone who lived alone for 10 years, she said one afternoon. "You're surprisingly bossy for someone who's never built anything." "I have excellent ideas." "You have loud ideas." "Same thing." They were laughing when the rider appeared. Rowan saw him first, a lone horseman coming up the valley trail, moving at an easy pace. He grabbed his rifle on instinct, then recognized the horse. Sheriff Hayes. The old lawman looked even more tired than usual as he dismounted. "You two are hard to find." "That's the idea," Rowan said. "What brings you out here?" "News. Thought you'd want to hear it in person." Hayes accepted the water Eliza offered. Frank Mercer's estate is being liquidated. Everything he owned, the bank, the properties, the fraudulent deeds, it's all being seized by the territorial government. "Good," Eliza said. "Gets better. The families he stole from are being compensated. The court's using Mercer's assets to restore the properties to their rightful owners." Hayes looked at her. "That includes your father's office and house. They're yours again, free and clear." Eliza went very still. "What?" "The judge ruled that since Mercer's debt against your father was based on fraud and extortion, it's null. Everything Thomas Hart owned reverts to his heir." Hayes pulled out a folded document. "That's you." She took the paper with shaking hands. I can't. "You don't have to decide anything now," Hayes said gently. "The properties are being held in trust until you're ready to claim them. Could be tomorrow, could be next year. No rush." After Hayes left, Eliza sat on a half-finished log wall, staring at the document. "You all right?" Rowan asked. "I don't know. I thought it was all gone. The house, Dad's office, everything." She looked up. Now it's mine again, and I don't know what to do with it. What do you want to do? I want to burn it all down and dance in the ashes. She laughed, but there were tears on her face. I want to go back and erase everything that happened. I want my father alive and Frank Mercer dead 1,000 times over. Rowan sat beside her. But you can't have any of that. No, I can't. She wiped her eyes. So what do I do with the house I can't live in and an office I can't use? You could sell them. Maybe. Or... She was quiet for a moment. Or I could give them to someone who needs them. Turn the office into something useful. Make sure what happened to my father doesn't happen to someone else. Like what? Like a real legal office, for people who can't afford lawyers, for families fighting men like Mercer. Her voice grew stronger. Dad spent his life trying to protect people. Maybe I could finish what he started. Rowan looked at her. This woman who'd survived an auction, killed a man, faced down her demons, and still wanted to help people. She was either insane or extraordinary. Probably both. You'd need to hire someone to run it, he said. A real lawyer. I know, but the building's there, and Mercer's money could fund it for years. She turned to him. What do you think? I think your father would be proud. Yeah? Yeah. The first heavy snow came in late November. They'd finished the walls and roof just in time, though the interior was still rough. Bare floors, no furniture beyond what they'd cobbled together from scrap wood. But it was solid and warm, and it was theirs. They spent the first night in the new house wrapped in blankets near the fireplace, listening to the wind howl outside. I was thinking, Eliza said. Dangerous. We should get married. Actually, married, I mean. Not just territorial law in an auction. Something real. Rowan considered. Thought we were already married. Technically, but I'd like it to mean something. To choose it properly. She looked at him. Unless you're having second thoughts? About you? No. He brushed hair from her face. About my ability to be a decent husband? Constantly. You're doing fine so far. I haven't done anything yet. We've been too busy building. Exactly. You've been building us a home. You've listened to my ideas even when they were terrible. You've been patient with me when I couldn't lift the logs or when I burned dinner. She smiled. That's what being a decent husband looks like. Setting the bar pretty low. Maybe, but you keep clearing it anyway. They rode down to Iron Hollow a week later, through snow that was already knee-deep in places. The town looked different, cleaner somehow, though that might have been Rowan's imagination. Or maybe it was just that Frank Mercer's shadow had finally lifted. Father Domingo married them in the small church, with Sheriff Hayes and a few others as witnesses. It was simple and quick, nothing like the grand ceremonies wealthy families held. But when Domingo pronounced them married, and Rowan kissed Eliza while the small congregation applauded, it felt more real than anything he'd experienced in years. Afterward, they stopped by the old Hart House. It was exactly as Eliza had described, a modest 2-story with a wraparound porch, paint peeling but structurally sound. Her father's office was downtown, still locked and dusty. You sure about this? Rowan asked as she produced the key. No, but I'm doing it anyway. Inside the office was frozen in time, papers still scattered across the desk, law books lining the walls, her father's coat hanging on a peg by the door. Eliza walked through slowly, touching things. The desk, the chair, the old coffee pot. He spent so much time here, she said quietly, fighting battles he couldn't win. He won some. Not enough. Rowan didn't argue. He just stood nearby while she said whatever goodbye she needed to say. Finally, Eliza turned to him. I'm going to do it. Turn this into something useful, but I need your help. What kind of help? The kind where you don't let me back out when it gets hard. Where you remind me why it matters. She looked around the office. I can't run it myself, but I can fund it, organize it, make sure it happens. That's something, right? That's everything. They spent the next 2 days in town, meeting with lawyers and judges, setting up the framework for what Eliza called the Hart Legal Aid Office. It would offer free legal services to families who couldn't afford representation, funded by the seized Mercer assets. It wouldn't bring her father back, but it would ensure his work continued. On their last night in town, Marshal Reeves found them at the hotel. "Wanted to give you an update," he said. "The men we arrested from Mercer's crew, all of them are facing federal charges. Conspiracy, attempted murder, the works. They'll be in prison for years." "Good," Rowan said. "There's something else." Reeves pulled out a letter. "This came from the territorial governor. Official pardon for you, Cade, for the killing of David Voss." Rowan stared at the document. "Why?" "Because the governor reviewed the case, saw what Voss did to your family, decided it was justified." Reeves handed over the letter. "You're a free man. Officially. No more wanted posters, no more bounty hunters. You can go anywhere, do anything." The words didn't feel real. 12 years of running, of hiding, of looking over his shoulder, and it was just over? "What about Caleb Voss?" Eliza asked. "Will he accept this?" "Don't know, but legally he can't touch you now. If he tries, he's the one breaking the law." After Reeves left, Rowan sat with the pardon, reading it over and over. "How do you feel?" Eliza asked. "Strange. Like I should be relieved, but I'm just numb. It's a lot to process." "Yeah." He set down the paper. "For 12 years, I've been defined by what I did, by being a fugitive, and now that's gone, and I don't know who I am without it." Eliza took his hand. "You're Rowan Cade. You're my husband. You're a builder, a survivor, a man who saved me when he didn't have to." She smiled. "That's who you are. The rest is just history." They returned to the valley as winter settled in hard. The snow piled high, and for weeks at a time they were completely cut off from the outside world. But the house held, warm and tight, and they had supplies enough to last until spring. Those months were the hardest and the best of Rowan's life. Hard because cabin fever was real, and living in close quarters with another person after years of solitude took adjustment. They learned each other's rhythms, each other's moods, learned when to give space and when to push, learned to fight fair and forgive faster. Best because for the first time since his parents died, Rowan wasn't alone. He had Eliza, stubborn, fierce, imperfect Eliza, and she had him. They were building something together, not just the house, but a life, a future. On the coldest nights, they'd lie in bed and talk about what came next. Maybe horses in the spring, a garden, eventually a trip back east to see places neither of them had been. Maybe children someday, though that scared them both. "I don't know how to be a mother," Eliza admitted one night. "I don't know how to be a father. So we'll be terrible at it together. Probably. But we'll try anyway." "Yeah, we will." Spring came late that year, but when it finally arrived, the valley exploded into life. The meadow turned green, wildflowers blooming in riots of color. The creek ran high with snowmelt, and deer appeared in groups, grazing in the early mornings. Rowan and Eliza planted a garden, probably too late in the season, but they tried anyway. They built a proper lean-to for the horses. They'd acquired a mare over the winter from a trader passing through. They expanded the house slightly, adding a small room that might someday be a nursery. The work was constant and exhausting and satisfying in ways Rowan had forgotten existed. One afternoon in May, they were sitting on the porch they'd finally finished when Eliza spoke. "I'm pregnant." Rowan's hands stilled on the wood he'd been sanding. "What?" "I'm pregnant. About 3 months, I think." She was watching him carefully. "I wanted to be sure before I said anything." 1,000 thoughts crashed through his mind at once. Fear, joy, terror, wonder. "Are you—" He couldn't finish the question. "Scared?" "Yes." "Excited?" "Also yes." She moved to sit beside him. "I know we said maybe someday, but life doesn't wait for maybe." Rowan pulled her close, his mind reeling. A child. Their child. The thought was enormous, impossible. "We can do this," Eliza said quietly. "Right?" "I don't know. Maybe. Probably." He laughed, slightly hysterical. "We've survived everything else." "Exactly. Marriage auction, gunfights, Frank Mercer. How hard can one baby be?" "Very hard, probably." "Well, at least we're consistent." They told no one at first, keeping it between themselves like a secret. But as summer progressed and Eliza began to show, They made another trip to Iron Hollow. The town had changed visibly. New families moving in, businesses opening, a sense of possibility that hadn't existed under Mercer's shadow. The Hart Legal Aid office was operating, run by a young lawyer named Sarah Chen, who'd lost her family's farm to Mercer's schemes. She was smart, aggressive, and dedicated. Eliza met with her for hours, discussing cases and strategy. "She's good," Eliza told Rowan afterward. "Really good. Dad would have liked her." Sheriff Hayes threw them a dinner at the boarding house. Nothing fancy, but genuine. People came who Rowan had never expected to see again. Families he'd known before the land war, people who'd written him off as a killer. They congratulated him on the pardon, on his marriage, on the coming child. Some of them seemed sincere. Others were just being polite. But it didn't matter. Rowan was done caring what Iron Hollow thought of him. He had Eliza. He had a home. He had a future. That was enough. They were preparing to leave town when Marshal Reeves found them one last time. "Got news," he said. "Thought you should hear it. Caleb Voss enlisted. Army's recruiting for the Western campaigns. He signed up last month." "Where is he now?" Rowan asked. "Fort Laramie. Training. Won't be back this way for years, if ever." Reeves studied Rowan's face. "Thought that might give you peace." "Yeah, it does." After the marshal left, Eliza squeezed Rowan's hand. "He made a choice. To leave. To move forward, same as us." She smiled. "Everyone gets to choose how their story ends. He chose his. We chose ours." The pregnancy progressed through summer into fall. Eliza grew larger, slower, increasingly uncomfortable. She complained constantly about her swollen feet, her aching back, the way she couldn't see her own feet anymore. Rowan loved every moment of it. He became obsessive about preparing. He stocked extra supplies, brought in a midwife from a neighboring valley to check on Eliza, built a cradle from pine and lined it with furs. He read every book on childbirth he could find, which wasn't many, and worried constantly about everything that could go wrong. "You're going to drive yourself insane," Eliza said one evening. "Probably. And me along with you." "Sorry." "Don't be sorry. Just breathe. We've survived everything else. We'll survive this too." The baby came on a cold October morning, almost exactly a year after they'd first met. Rowan had assisted with animal births before, but nothing prepared him for the reality of watching Eliza in labor. The pain, the blood, the terrifying moments when he thought he might lose them both. But the midwife was competent, and Eliza was strong, stronger than anyone he'd ever known. She pushed and swore and cried and pushed some more. And then, as dawn broke over the mountains, their daughter entered the world screaming. The midwife cleaned her up and placed her in Eliza's arms. She was tiny, red-faced, perfect. "Sarah," Eliza said softly. "Her name is Sarah." Rowan's throat was too tight to speak. He just nodded and touched his daughter's tiny hand, feeling her fingers wrap around his. The midwife stayed for 3 days, making sure both mother and baby were healthy. Then she left, and it was just the three of them, Rowan, Eliza, and Sarah. The first weeks were chaos. Sarah cried constantly, needed feeding every few hours, produced an astonishing amount of waste for such a small person. Rowan and Eliza stumbled through it exhausted and overwhelmed. But slowly, they found their rhythm. Rowan learned to change diapers, to soothe Sarah when she was fussy, to walk her around the house at 3 a.m. while Eliza slept. Eliza learned to feed Sarah while half asleep, to function on scattered hours of rest, to trust that Rowan wouldn't drop their daughter despite his constant fear that he would. They were terrible at it, and they were also doing fine. Winter came again, but this year it felt different. The house was warmer, fuller. Sarah's presence changed everything, the rhythm of their days, the way they talked to each other, the future they imagined. On a clear February morning, with snow thick on the ground and sunlight streaming through the windows, Rowan stood on the porch holding his daughter. She was 4 months old now, starting to focus on faces, making small sounds that might someday be words. Eliza came out to join them, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Everything. Nothing." He adjusted Sarah's blanket. "About how a year ago I was alone on a mountain thinking that was all I'd ever have. And now, Now you have a wife who snores and a baby who never sleeps. Now I have everything. Eliza leaned against him. You're getting sentimental in your old age. I'm 33. Ancient. They stood there watching the sun climb higher, painting the valley in shades of gold and white. Below them, Iron Hollow was invisible, hidden by distance and trees. But it was there, rebuilding itself, moving forward. Sarah made a small sound, not quite a laugh, but close. She's going to be stubborn like you, Rowan said, and quiet like you. That's a terrible combination. Probably, but she's ours. Eliza touched their daughter's face gently. What do you think we should tell her? About how we met? The truth. That you bought me at an auction? That I made the best decision of my life. He looked at Eliza. That I saw a woman who refused to break and I couldn't walk away. That's better than my version. What's your version? That I saw a scarred mountain man with bad coffee and worse social skills, and I thought, yeah, that'll do. Rowan laughed. Sarah startled at the sound, her eyes going wide. We should probably work on our story before she's old enough to understand, he said. We have time. Yeah, we do. They went back inside as the day grew colder. Rowan built up the fire while Eliza settled into the rocking chair he'd made. Sarah nestled against her. The house smelled like wood smoke and coffee and the bread Eliza had baked the day before. It wasn't perfect. The roof still leaked in one corner when it rained hard. The floor was uneven, the windows didn't quite fit their frames. But it was home, built with their own hands, filled with their own life. Outside, the mountains stretched endlessly, wild and beautiful and indifferent. But inside there was warmth and safety and love that had been fought for and earned. Rowan looked at his wife and daughter, at the life they'd built from desperation and violence and impossible choices. He thought about the auction platform, about Frank Mercer's sneer, about the moment he'd stepped forward and changed everything. Best $3,000 he'd ever spent. Eliza caught him staring. What? Just thinking. About? About how we got here. About everything that had to happen. All the bad and the terrible and the impossible. For us to end up in this exact moment. Regretting it? Not for a second. Sarah yawned, a tiny, perfect yawn, and closed her eyes. Eliza began to hum softly, something Rowan didn't recognize but found beautiful anyway. The fire crackled, snow fell softly outside. The world kept turning, indifferent to their small happiness. But in this house, in this valley, Rowan Cade had everything he'd never known he needed. A wife who challenged him daily, a daughter who terrified him with her fragility and filled him with purpose. A life built not from running or hiding, but from choosing to stand and fight. The past was finally behind them. The ghosts had been laid to rest. And the future, uncertain, difficult, but theirs, stretched ahead like an open trail. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. That was the only certainty that mattered. As evening settled over the valley and Eliza carried Sarah to bed, Rowan stood at the window looking out at the darkening mountains. Somewhere out there, Caleb Voss was building his own life. Somewhere, Iron Hollow was healing. Somewhere, the world continued its endless cycle of violence and redemption. But here, in this small house, on this remote mountain, peace had finally found two people who'd earned it the hard way. Rowan closed the curtain, banked the fire, and joined his family. The mountain had taken everything from him once. Now it had given him everything back. And that, he thought, as he drifted towards sleep with Eliza's hand in his, was more than he'd ever deserved and exactly what he'd always needed. The story that began with an auction and an exile ended with a home and a heartbeat. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And it was theirs.